Thanks, members. As indicated, as we are short of our chair and our deputy chair, at least for an hour, can I ask members if they would care to nominate someone to take the chair? Mr. Buckley?
Chair, can I propose David Honeyford takes the chair until our chair returns?
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
And seconded by Sinead. Are there any other nominations? No, there are not. As there are not, I'll just invite Mr. Honeyford to come forward. And if members will just give us 2 minutes, we'll just suspend proceedings. I'll just take them through what we're going to be up to today very briefly, because Philip will be with us shortly. So if members are content just to suspend proceedings for a second. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you. Bringing his tea, good thinking. We're go.
Thank you. Thank you again. Guys, listen, we're run through, so apologies, we'll have Dan Forsyth. There's no other members, okay. Then declarations of interest. Has anybody got anything they wish to declare? No? Yeah?
Bringing forward a regional balance bill shortly, so that may be of interest to the conversation.
On then, Chairman's business, just to note that Philip met informally with Microsoft Ireland the 27th of May relating to AI in Northern Ireland, and the clerk has already, I think, circulated the summary of that. Is everybody content with that summary?
Yes, content with it, and just to note that Microsoft have launched their manifesto on AI, so just it may be worth having a chat with them at some point when we revisit AI again and what they're asking for.
Agreed.
Is that agreed? Yeah. Is that agreed? Everyone else agreed with that? No? Yeah. Okay. And then draft minutes, page 7 of the pack. You'll find a copy of the draft minutes from the meeting on the 27th of May 2026. Are you content the draft minutes are accurate and complete record of the committee's deliberations? Everybody content? Agreed? Yeah. Okay. Matters arising. Are there any matters arising? Yeah, Declan.
David, when we were in closed session, Peter helpfully sketched out options for us in relation to progressing scrutiny last week. So I have a concern that the ongoing delay in relation to getting the Good Jobs Bill onto the floor of the Assembly could particularly endanger or delay us being able to proceed with the paid neonatal care provision in the bill, and moving ahead with that particularly important element of the bill. So my suggestion in terms of actioning that matter arising is that the committee would write to OFM DFM, to the Executive Office, expressing a concern that ongoing uncertainty and delay in relation to bringing the bill into the Assembly would in particular create a problem and cause a delay for that particular provision, which is so important in relation to the enhancement of protections for workers.
You want to write it to you?
Yes,
yeah.
Urging that the matter is expedited. Yeah. Whatever difficulties there are, we shouldn't see something as important as that any further delayed.
Okay. Patrick, you want to answer?
Yeah, look, totally agree with that. I think that what we can't have is any delays to pivotal pieces of the Good Jobs Bill provision, as Declan has outlined. So very happy to second that proposal.
Chair, whilst I have no issue with that particular aspect of the bit that Declan has mentioned, I wouldn't want it to reflect a wider view of the committee in terms of the wider piece of legislation, which we have had no sight of.
Yeah. Okay, noted. Jonathan, Kate, do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. I think in previous conversations within the committee, we know that there are other things that play in the background perhaps, but we've all said that we want to get to work on this bill. We've got a time frame we're trying to work towards, and we want to see it in the Assembly and in committee so we can scrutinise it. So I see no problem in writing to OFM DFM saying that there is a timeline, and for us to get to work, it needs to be brought forward soon.
Is everybody content with that? Jonathan, you content with that there? Dan,
yes, just with the caveat that it's not prejudicing the committee taking a view on the wider bill. I have no problem with Declan specific on neonatal. No problem at all with that.
Okay, no problem. Declan,
to reassure Jonathan on that point. Look, whatever the political dynamics are which is causing delay in relation to moving the bill onto the floor of the Assembly, on this particular issue, it is critical. I think all of us on a cross-party basis can agree the prospect of paid neonatal leave care is critically important for a whole cohort within society. It's about future-proofing and particular protections. And if a letter from the committee can grease the wheels, move things along, and encourage the Executive Office to get this out the door, then I think we should do so.
Then, with everything said, then we agreed that we go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Any other members? No. Everything? No. Okay. So we'll move to item 6 on your papers, which is the regional economic balance with DFE and Invest NI. We'll now receive evidence from the department and Invest on the aspects of the regional balance bill. So we invite forward. So we have. Swapping names right now. Alison. I looked up and went, that's not Alison. we have Alison Curry, which Chief Development Officer in Invest NI, Ethna McNamee, Head of Regional Business and Western Region Invest NI, and Julia Nicol Queen Teague, if I said that right, in DFE from Social and Regional Economy. So if I pass over to you, Alison, whoever's leading.
To be up on a high
Julia, you can open up Julia first, yes?
Yes, so I'll speak for a few minutes before handing over to Alison. So thank you for having us here this morning. I'm going to speak a little bit about just the work on local economic partnerships, which is in my remit. So local economic partnerships were set up in every council area, and these are partnerships involving councils and some other mandatory stakeholders like FE colleges, local enterprise agencies, businesses and the third sector. And other stakeholders as appropriate can be on these, for example, universities or other business sectoral organisations that are relevant in different areas. So these have been tasked with coming up with an action plan to grow the local economy in their area. The department has provided a 45 million fund to do this. As of today, 9 of the 11 areas have agreed action plans, so the remaining ones are Mid and East Antrim and Fermanagh and Omagh, and that's just an update on the position as it was in the briefing paper. Belfast City Council one was agreed by the Minister yesterday, so that's as it is at the moment. So this initiative was designed to deliver on the Minister's priority of regional balance, and that's why the funding formula was weighted towards peripherality to reflect the need to reflect that regional perspective. But it's also designed to leverage the expertise of local stakeholders around what their area needs, and to date this has proved really valuable in each of these. We've tried to be as flexible as possible in delivering this, and one of the ways that you can see that is probably in the funding profile. So we started with a flat 15 million profile in every year, not unexpectedly, as action plans came in and as it was clear how councils were using their own funding for this, particularly in year 1. We've updated that profile to reflect much less spend last year, although we're still waiting some claims to come in from last year, with greater spend this year and next year. So we continue to work with councils on profiles and work closely with our finance colleagues to ensure that they're aware of what we need and any underspends. But this, well, as I said, this flexibility is visible in other ways too. Partnerships have moved at different speeds, and some have spent a lot more time than others debating things and agreeing priorities, and that's what we wanted really, that by the end of the process that they come out with an agreed action plan that everyone in the area can get behind. So you can also see it in terms of how the partnership is formed, or where it sits within council structures, and even the different project priorities. This is a 3-year fund, so while year 1 was mainly around kind of the initiation phase of planning and design, you can see really this year the move to delivery. So some recent things, so in Newry Morning Down, they've had 2 AAI workshops to date, so 70 attendees at those. Their sustainable tourism network is set up and running. Their commercial property grants should launch next week. In Derry City and Strabane, 2 kind of schemes are out today. So one is a grant scheme for businesses, and one is out to seek a bespoke kind of enterprise support service for Derry City and Strabane. And in Lisburn and Castlereagh, there was a successful kind of trade programme over the last month where businesses got a good lot of support to explore the Irish and London markets. I've attached some of the content of the action plans to the back of the briefing paper, so hopefully you get a sense of the range of different things involved. That'll be delivered this year and next year. And just on the briefing paper, I spotted as I was going through things this morning, there's one error that you might have noticed. On the first page, the numbers are obviously repeated, but on the second number 2, it says the gap between the highest and lowest was 12%. That should read 16.2%. That was just an error in the drafting, so apologies for that. And I suppose just before I pass over to Alison, this work involved a lot of work with the regional teams in Invest, and one of which Ethna leads, of course, the Western team. And working on these partnerships gives you a real insight into the value of that work and how important those regional offices are to supporting businesses in different areas. And that's why it's so good to see the greater recognition of those offices and greater resources towards them. But anyway, I'm happy to take questions, but I'll pass over to Alison to...
Thanks, Julia. Thank you, Chair and members, for the opportunity to discuss regional balance this morning. Regional balance matters because it unlocks the full economic potential of every area, creates opportunities for all communities, strengthens productivity and builds a more inclusive, resilient and sustainable economy. I'm Alison Curry, Chief Development Officer. I commenced this new role in Invest NI in January 2026. I have responsibility for our regional development agenda, including our regional business group, land and property, and our new client solutions group, which brings together innovation, research and development, entrepreneurship, green economy and energy efficiency, cluster development, operational excellence, supply chain development, and leadership and skills support. I have over 20 years' experience in economic development across Northern Ireland, Ireland and Scotland. Before Invest NI, I was Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Intertrade Ireland and previously worked in the design and delivery of national and regional business support programmes in Scotland. I know firsthand how important entrepreneurship and innovation are to regional balance and economic growth. In my first months in post, it's been clear that regional balance and strong local partnerships are central to the Minister's priorities and Invest NI's strategy. Within Invest NI, there is a drive and ambition to deliver regional balance. I'm joined today by my colleague Ethna McNamee, who is Head of Regional Business in our Western region. To strengthen delivery, we have introduced a 5-region operating model across Northern Ireland. So Belfast, the North West, Southern, Eastern and Western. We've recruited 5 senior heads of regional business, increased client-facing staff and restructured portfolios to broaden reach and improve local delivery. These regional teams work closely with councils, colleges and the wider ecosystem to identify entrepreneurs and businesses with growth potential, supporting them with advice, mentoring, skills and finance at each stage. Entrepreneurship is one of the strongest drivers of regional balance because successful homegrown firms create jobs, build skills and anchor growth locally. Our Founders Lab Accelerator and Pre-Accelerator help innovation-led startups test ideas and find routes to market. Nearly 30% of Founders Lab's participants and over 70% of Pre-Accelerator participants are based outside the Belfast metropolitan area, and we are now seeing that translate into results with firms based in Derry like Consultation and Life Sales NI attracting private investment and scaling into new markets. We also support investment right across Northern Ireland by helping established firms, both locally and internationally owned, to invest and reinvest. Programmes such as our Ambition to Grow have already onboarded more than 270 new client companies and are helping firms increase external sales and jobs. Oma-based Oatco Superfuel is one example, having progressed through the programme before securing investment after appearing on Dragon's Den. Our Agri-Food Investment Initiative is helping a key sub-regional sector improve productivity, efficiency and job quality. Earlier this week we announced support for Craigavon-based Kestrel Foods to invest £5 million in automation, increasing productivity and creating 29 jobs. And as I speak this morning, the Minister is announcing that with support of our Agri-Food Investment Initiative, Coleraine-based Lackpatrick Dairies will invest £24.5 million in automation to increase its productivity and sustainability. Other notable reinvestments include EY's new office in the North West and Fintru's continued expansion in the region. Within the Belfast metropolitan area, there are also areas of deprivation where investment and job creation remain important. We have supported companies such as Cerdan, iVerify and Achilles through R&D and with job creation. Regional balance is also being advanced through inward investment, with visits across Northern Ireland rising from 67 in 2023-24 to 165 in 2025-26. Last year, this included first-time investments by Bank of America, Billergini and iRail. Our regional property strategy is also a critical enabler of regional balance, and we are working with councils to progress key sites including Desert Crete in Cookstown and Mandeville in Craigavon. We are now in the final year of our 3-year strategy, and while the 2025-26 figures are still being validated, early results suggest we have met or exceeded most targets, with investment delivered across every council area. We expect to publish the final results shortly and would be pleased to return to discuss them with the committee. Early highlights point to stronger innovation activity, better access to finance, increased green investment support and continued business expansion across Northern Ireland. However, improving regional balance is not just about what InvestNI does. Northern Ireland's regional disparities are shaped by wider structural issues such as infrastructure, connectivity, planning, public services and skills. Progress depends on purposeful partnership across departments and agencies. Alternative funding is also becoming important. Through the Shared Island Enterprise Scheme with Intertrade Ireland and Enterprise Ireland, we are supporting female entrepreneurship, clustering and sustainability investment, including projects in Mid-Ulster to help businesses decarbonise, adopt greener processes and create high-quality jobs. We are also working with City and Growth Deal partners on projects that turn regional balance into investment, innovation and skills on the ground, including Ulster University's Centre for Food and Drug Discovery in Coleraine, Ulster University's Cognitive Analytics and Digital Robotics Innovation Centre in Derry and Strabane, and Queen's £98 million Advanced Manufacturing Innovation Centre at Global Point in Belfast. In summary, we are turning the Minister's priority on regional balance into practical delivery across Northern Ireland. Our focus now is to build on that progress and make sure every region shares in the next phase of growth. Thank you, Chair, and we welcome questions from the committee members.
Okay, go to straight away. Questions, no problem at all. I'm going to open this straight away and I'll go to Sinead first.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your opening statement. Alison, I think you've clearly articulated the importance of regional balance and how it is not just the purview of the Department for Economy, but it must be across all departments within government in order to actually achieve true regional balance. And as you know, when InvestNI came to the committee in December 2025, we discussed the reliability and the appropriateness of the data that was actually presented. And I'm really looking forward to the 25-26 figures just to evaluate, the progress that has been made in the past 12 months. Last year, out of the 19 new inward investments, none of them went to the Northwest. And out of the 500 and odd jobs, again, 560 jobs, almost 600 jobs, not one came to Derry. And that kind of really shone a light on, what is the actual policy within the department in order to achieve true regional balance where there is new businesses coming to the regions. And it wasn't that they went to any other region apart from the Belfast metropolitan area. I think maybe one other region got new inward investment. Will the results prove different in 25-26? I know you're actually there, you've got the results in, obviously the year's ended in April, and you're evaluating them. Will they prove good news for the Northwest this year?
The results are being validated and independently and really robustly assessed at the moment, and we do that because we publish all of our performance data on Open Data NI. I think we're one of the only public bodies to do that, and we do that so everybody can see exactly what we've delivered, where and how much those investments have been made. What I can say, and I don't want to give incorrect figures to the committee at this stage, is that we look like we have met or exceeded most of those Year 2 strategy targets, and that puts a really good foundation in place for us.
You looked last year as if you had as well, apart from when you actually evaluated them, because last year you achieved 59% target in your regional balance, but when we actually went into the figures, you were counting projects rather than the value of the projects. Some of the projects could be about £800 worth and created no jobs at all. So it's really critical that what you count and the data, that you actually measure outcomes and the impact that it has to communities and people's standard of living. And I'll tell you, the people in the Northwest did not feel that the dial had moved significantly at all in relation to inward investment last year. So what I'm asking you is twofold. Will the results be different this year in terms of new inward investment, new entrants into the Northwest, and jobs created as a result of that? or are you continuing to measure projects like number 1, number 2, number 3, rather than the actual value of them? Because I was very critical last year, and both the Chief Executive of Invest NI and indeed the Minister said that they were prepared to look at that monitoring of that data and the appropriateness of it, on whether it was actually delivering regional balance, which it really isn't.
To give you some assurance, Sinead, we do measure the volume of investments, but we also measure the value of investments, and it looks like the value of those investments are increasing right across all of the regions of Northern Ireland. You made the point about inward investment. I would kind of put back to you, I suppose, that look, other ways that we can really improve and achieve regional balance is by supporting our homegrown local entrepreneurs. So we want more people to start businesses. We want more people right across the regions to start businesses and access our supports through things like our Founders Lab programme. And I mentioned there in the opening statement that 70% of those participants on that pre-accelerator, which go into the accelerator, and those are our high growth scaling businesses, are from outside the Belfast metropolitan area. We also want to support those entrepreneurs who have established firms to expand, whether that's looking at their leadership and their skills, looking at innovation and R&D. We want to onboard new clients to Invest NI, and over the last number of years, I think we've onboarded over 280 new clients through our Ambition to Grow programme. That is supporting existing entrepreneurs who employ people in all of the regions to increase their external sales, to take on new employees. And that might be a business that employs 2 people, doubling to 4 or 10 to 20. We've examples like the Basalt Distillery in Bushmills. They have increased their external sales, taken on 2 new staff. They attended a trade fair with us in Germany as well. We've got Demanu, who manufacture products and services. They are looking for new expansion land to increase the products and services that they can help other businesses with. So I am confident that we will be delivering more. The results will show that we've delivered more to support those local businesses. And I guess my ask would be, I'm sorry that you're meeting people who don't feel that dial is changing. I would ask you as our elected members, if you're engaging with business people, tell them that Invest NI is open for business. We want to engage and work with every business. We might not have finance for every business, but we will absolutely have information, advice, signposting, guidance. We're working with the councils, we're working with our stakeholders right across the whole business ecosystem. We want those businesses to engage with us, and through our regional office, we are, I suppose, doing that outward facing. We've got more client staff there. We're working with bigger client portfolios. And I suppose the real purpose behind that is to ensure that actually we're delivering for local businesses and entrepreneurs what they need, supports that will help them address their challenges, their barriers, but also take advantage of the opportunities that they have in front of them. And that's what those regional staff are doing right across those regional offices for us.
And Alison, I have to put on the record, there's a lot of good work going on the ground, and businesses are engaged in the programmes, and more people are coming forward, particularly around innovation and training, and that is really, really good. What I'm talking about is jobs created and wages going up in an area, and new entrants coming in, new lifeblood, because that's really, really important as well. It's really important to grow both. It's not one or the other. And as I say, the Belfast metropolitan area is getting new growth all the time, and the rest of the regions, west of the Van in particular, are being totally left out of that. That's not to say that we haven't got absolutely fabulous businesses, global leading in all areas. And when you compare, I look quite often at Cork as an example outside of the Dublin metropolitan area, and how it is actually thriving. And it's not just Cork City, it's places like Kinsale. Kinsale are delivering Monjaro throughout the whole world. It is absolutely massive. Viagra all comes from outside of Cork. Botox, all of those pharmaceuticals, they are selling it to the world, and it's not in the city, it's in the smaller even city regions, and that's not happening here. We're not bringing those new entrants in to the smaller regions throughout everything lands in Belfast, and hopefully the results this year will tell us a different story, because as you said, we are almost at the end of this business, your business plan, and we haven't seen that dial move at all in terms of new entrants, but good work going on in other areas. You've talked about R&D as well. Belfast accounts for 60% of all Innovate UK spend across Northern Ireland, while Fermanagh and Omagh receive less than 1%, and I'm afraid Causeway Coast and Glens and Derry City and Strabane are on the same kind of wavelength. What are you doing to actually move that dial in terms of innovative funds coming in from the UK as well? Because that's really important. Innovation is the lifeblood as well of our existing businesses in order for them to move forward, particularly in the AI world that we're living in at the moment.
I agree, Sinead. Innovation is a primary driver of business growth and really important. At Invest NI, we're working really closely with Innovate UK, and we wanted to change that percentage figure right across Northern Ireland so that more entrepreneurs and firms are able to access that Innovate UK funding. And in fact, last month we held an Innovate UK event up in Ebrington in Derry, and we had over 120 businesses there networking and understanding what the funds are that are available. So our teams are working, I suppose, to help those first-time innovators understand how innovation can help them develop new products or services, how they can bring efficiencies to their business. And we have a whole innovation pathway there really that supports those first-time innovators right up to experienced innovators who are working on really extensive R&D projects. And that might be, you might have examples of
well, I'm just thinking about, you mentioned Fermanagh and Omagh and the innovation deficit that exists there. I suppose for us, I mean, that's an area that obviously I'm working in over a long number of years. There's a couple of factors that are important to note, and the structure of the economy in Fermanagh and Omagh is such that it's very largely dependent on agriculture, large construction sector. So the nature of the businesses there, we have been out in the marketplace with a whole continuum of innovation supports, from innovation vouchers, technical development incentives, right through to large-scale R&D. Last year we adopted our early first-time R&D support so that it was a more simplified application form, easier, higher levels of support. And on the back of that, we have found really heavy engagement in those areas around that early stage R&D. So we're very alert to that innovation pathway and how it leads to higher competitiveness in business, and how areas of Northern Ireland, I mean, I know that you had a presentation from the Chief Scientific Officer about the importance of research and development, and we fully endorse that situation. The local economic partnerships have been instrumental in, I think, every partnership almost now has identified the need to adopt strategies to embed AI, new innovative practices within business. So there's a whole host of supports for that early stage, but we would totally agree with you. Anything that we can do to support that pathway around innovation. But I think there's a huge amount of support through the regional offices. We have the innovation advisors who will go out to businesses and actually help them to complete their application forms. So if there are businesses out there that you as committee members are aware of, there's hands-on support available to those businesses, whether it's to complete innovation vouchers, whether it's to complete R&D application forms. And then Innovate UK are actually housed within our building in Belfast, so we can make the referrals through to Innovate UK directly from the teams. So it's something that we would really encourage, that if there's opportunities to do more, we feel that's something that certainly can help regional economies.
It really is a red flag, because without innovation you cannot close the productivity gap, and the productivity gap is it's getting bigger for some of the regions. And just getting back to what you measure, Alison, why are we not measuring productivity as an outcome and a target for Invest NI? You know, we're measuring activities like a project, but we're not measuring what the actual outcome of that investment is actually doing in relation to closing those gaps and actually promoting and given true regional balance a chance. If we're not actually measuring it, if you're even say company A gets money year 1, year 2, year 3, how are you measuring exactly how productive that money is given to the community and the place and the company? How do we know that money's working for Northern Ireland, for all of Northern Ireland?
It's a really important point. So every year we do our client performance indicators. Those are official statistics where we record details from all of our clients on their sales, their new products and services, their employee numbers, their GVA, and productivity is a real driver, we know that, of regional balance, and something that we're working hard to assess. We have developed a new productivity assessment tool which we are piloting. We hope to have the results of that to be able to publish the last 2 years' results in June, and then we will roll that out across all of our activity. But be assured, Sinead, we are measuring all of those things that you mentioned in terms of sales, job created, and in terms of that value for money, if you like, in those investments. And typically, for every £1 of investment that we spend, that brings an additional £6 of investment into the local economy.
And that's right. But why then, whenever you are reporting on regional balance, are you just reporting on projects rather than the actual impact that they've had? You're just reporting on numbers rather than actually impact and outcome.
My understanding is that we report the number of projects, but also the value of those
number of
projects
is
and
we've
the
achieved
outcomes from those
59%,
projects.
and that's the number of projects. That's not impact, and that's not outcome, and that's not feeling it in the pockets of workers or feeling it even in communities. That's not regional balance. That's just activity being measured rather than the actual real outcomes, the real economic indices that see that transformation and change.
I think to go back and restate, we do our client performance indicators. Those measure all of those outcomes. Those are reported. Every programme that we deliver has an evaluation that looks at the value for money and the economic outcomes generated by it. All of those are publicly available. So those will all be published again with our year-end results at the end of June.
Look forward to seeing them and analysing them. Thank you.
Thank you. And colleagues, can I apologise for my lateness today? Alison, can I congratulate you on your recent appointment? Ethne, you're very welcome. And Julia, can I thank you for your ongoing work and publicly recognise your vital work in terms of engagement with the UK government in securing that project for the North City Business Park, which is vital to my constituency. So I personally thank you for your work on that. And can I thank the acting chair, who more than capably replaced me, Diana.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the panel. It's good to see you here. And Sinead has touched on a number of points that I would raise, and I represent Fermanagh South Tyrone. So one fits in the Fermanagh Oma camp and the others in Mid-Ulster. And looking at regional imbalance, I do welcome. I'm aware of programmes that Invest NI does run throughout the Dungannon and Enniskillen, and the uptake is really good. And particularly for the tourist industry, I want to know maybe in particular, Ethna, how you see tourism using innovation vouchers. Can you see an uptake in the innovation vouchers and wanting to innovate and develop products?
I personally couldn't give you the specifics around how many businesses are using innovation vouchers from a tourism perspective, but what I could say is that all of those businesses in tourism who are building innovative capacity will be eligible, and that I know that South West College, who are one of the knowledge providers in innovation vouchers, they deliver the highest number of, or one of the highest numbers of innovation vouchers, but I certainly could get you the information. From our perspective, regionally, we see the importance of tourism to the economy, particularly in Fermanagh and Oma, and from that innovative capacity, all of those supports around leadership, around capability, around innovation, they're all available to our tourism providers. And I know a lot of the tourism providers locally have used our ICT supports for new systems. In fact, I know that one of our tourism providers is now developing a new system across all of the tourism accommodation providers. So we would welcome, certainly it's something I couldn't give you an accurate figure on, but we would certainly welcome if more of those providers were looking to engage in that support around innovation, which would drive productivity. We're also very mindful of the challenges around the tourism sector and the need to drive productivity, wages growth, to create sustainability within that sector. So it's something certainly I would be very happy to bring you very factual information on, but certainly if there was a group of providers locally who wanted to talk about innovation supports and building innovation capacity, we would be very happy to organise a workshop or a seminar. Last year we held a seminar in the Workhouse and another one in Oma around accessing our R&D supports, and we'd be very happy to roll that out locally again.
Thank you. And traditionally, Fermanagh is an SME economy, and can you see? I don't think in terms of regional imbalance, I can't see huge industry happening. It's an area that you want. That I think the focus now is on green technology, green tourism. Again, so can you outline through the regional balance units, Julia, what steps do you see to grow the economy in terms of green technologies in that region?
In terms of green technologies, that's not my area in particular, but it's something the LEP in the area has been discussing in terms of prioritising. They
don't have their plan just ready. Is there a reason? Is there a problem in developing it? Because
to be honest, looking across them, they're all different sets of stakeholders that require different amounts of time to talk these things through. With the timing of things, some areas move very quickly to agree priorities, but then take longer to deliver. Some people seem to take longer to discuss their priorities, but then can deliver very quickly. So there's no particular problem in that area, but it's just stakeholders are taking a bit more time, and obviously in an area where there's a smaller business base, shall we say, it's getting the right people on the LEP has been one of the challenges in the area, but they're well placed now. And I think you were at a meeting last week. They had a really good meeting.
I would be very confident within the next 2 weeks. I mean, essentially, Fermanagh and Oma have taken a lot of time to engage with business, a lot of time to formulate the right actions, a lot of time to make sure that the partnership have ownership of the plan. And in actual fact, in that ownership, I can see a lot of really good things happening as the partners. There's some unintended consequences as well, where the partners in those meetings are discussing other projects which are maybe critical infrastructure projects. So whilst that time maybe hasn't delivered the plan, it has delivered something for me personally, which I would see will be a huge benefit to the area if it pulls off in the longer term. I might pick up on the green economy as well, because I'm quite close to some of the growth deal plans that are being worked through in that particular area as well. So you'll be familiar with the Desert Creek project, which is obviously a green innovation technology park. And aligned to that, Fermanagh and Oma are looking at the sustainability opportunities for their great growth deal as well. And I think someone described it to me as a necklace. So if you look at the Carn and Seago and the work that's been done there around the Green Energy District, and then moving into Desert Creek and moving down. So all of that is building a proposition around green energy, supported by growth deals, supported by local economic partnership, supported by a huge amount of work that has been done around the IDNI, which is the Decarbonisation Clustering Programme, which evidences the opportunity to decarbonise and the huge economic advantage and, I suppose, productivity impact that will have on that region. And I suppose I should also say that whilst there are fairly few large companies, we are aware that a number of those large companies are doing very significant green energy projects, and some of that is being considered in the context of UK funding as well.
And on that point, in job creation, job growth, will that can you anticipate job growth and innovation in that area, because it is more of a peripheral area?
Absolutely. I suppose this is part of the bigger picture of building the infrastructure. So we will build the critical infrastructure around green energy within the district. and that will build the proposition for international investment. So I understand Sinead's frustration around the international. I live in the Derry and Strabane Council area, so I cannot be accused of not knowing what is happening. But we need to build the infrastructure, the credit, so that the proposition then actually sells itself. And I've seen that. I've seen international investors come to talk about what they know are planned investments in the district.
Very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Padraig?
Thank you for your presentation. It's been really useful, and I think you set out exactly what you've been doing in terms of realising the Minister's vision for regional balance and delivering that on the ground. So that's obviously very welcome. There's 2 points for me. The first one is around the Invest NI office in Derry, and then the second one is around shared island funding. So just on the office, the key point that you have mentioned is around that confidence in business, giving them that ability to explore all their options, look at innovation, look at growth and so on. And obviously a key part of that is the front-facing element of Invest NI and how they can access that. So as has been mentioned, there's great staff in Derry, there's a great ability and a great connection with business, and I've been to very many of their events as a local rep. There's obviously progress happening around the office, around creating the new office. So an update maybe would be useful on where that's at, how that is going to help actually engage other businesses. And I suppose as part of that, how does that, I suppose, feed into a wider engagement piece in Derry and the Northwest?
Certainly. So you are probably aware that there are plans for a new Northwest office. A business case has been approved for that. I can't just announce just yet where that new office will be, but it is in Derry. That is going to be a very modern, future-focused office that it will be well resourced in terms of staff, a real jewel in the crown for inward investors to come and visit, to see the office. We'll be close to clients who are there, large clients and small clients, and plans for that office will be for that to become a real regional hub. We want our partners, our stakeholders, our clients, our businesses to be working with us in that office whenever that is formally announced and opened, hopefully later this year.
And I think that's one of the things that struck me anytime I visited the office in Belfast, is that there's the ability from staff from all across to come in and use the office and access it and so on. So it would be great to see the same in Derry and to see staff coming in from other areas and other...
And you will, and actually we're already doing that. We don't need the new office to do that. For example, our R&D, our innovation staff would regularly be up in the region, hosting business breakfasts, engaging with clients. And, it's probably worth noting, actually, even for the Northwest, that Seagate R&D project was one of the largest projects that Invest NI ever secured for Northern Ireland. That's based in Derry. That was a really competitive process to ensure that R&D project landed in Northern Ireland. And that really positions that Northwest and Northern Ireland as that centre for excellence in photonics. There's excellent work going on there and the supply chains into that. So there are really positive opportunities in the Northwest.
Maybe could I also say, just as an example, in the OMA office, whilst it's located in OMA, has a regional team. Also, there are staff from the food sector, from skills, from property, from entrepreneurship, from comms. So it is a cross-section, and every day you will see staff from all of the divisions. ICT were with us yesterday. So it is very much a cross-organisational office, not just a regional office. And I think sometimes people just miss the breadth of supports that actually are available in the regional offices.
No, definitely, and it will be good to see that continued growth. The second point for me is around the shared island funding. So obviously key to Derry and the Northwest, but key to all border regions who have been disadvantaged by partition and the lack of economic opportunity and growth. So 2 points in that. I suppose, how does that benefit your work on All Ireland cooperation? But secondly, how does that link in with other funding streams? Because what we've heard in the past, and this is from investment but right across the board, is that sometimes when this funding becomes available, it's isolated to certain pockets. So we're keen, and this has been something consistently that's come up, that as a committee we understand how does that interact with other funding streams, other funding pots and other funding priorities.
I can talk to the shared island. So Invest Northern Ireland is working very closely with Intertrade Ireland and Enterprise Ireland, and that partnership secured a €30 million investment to focus on female entrepreneurship, clustering and sustainability, and that is being deployed right across the island. There are events and kind of skills transfer, workshops and investment projects happening right across the island. So that, I suppose, gives us an alternative funding stream to do more and different work. We continue to work with those partners. I think that was the first time those 3 agencies had worked collaboratively. That's really important. But we also look for other sources of funding from UK government to ensure that we're covering both the east, west, north, south. Those are lined up in things like City and Growth Deal. So we want those all to be connected rather than isolated pots and siloed activity.
Are there any so that's 100%, and it's great to hear that has been done. Are there any kind of examples of that in terms of how that funding comes together, or any
in terms of actually deploying the funding? Yeah, so I can, within the sustainability project, for example, Invest NI out of that pot had €10 million to support sustainability, which is essentially supporting companies to introduce new technologies into their business to reduce carbon outputs. So 2 of those have been announced. One is ONS Doors. They are a manufacturer of kitchen and bedroom furniture doors. A lot of MDF dust produced there. Rather than that going to waste, they are reusing that MDF dust to heat and power their factory, and then that heats they need to put a kind of lacquer spray on top of those doors. They are shipping something like 4,500 doors around the world. They're a massive exporter to the US of kitchen doors. Chances are everybody here has a kitchen door that might have been made in Mid-Ulster by ONS Doors. So that's a real tangible example. The other agencies are taking leads on things like clustering and female entrepreneurship, but we're a big supporter there. In fact, this weekend there's a big female entrepreneurship event in Lustybeg. We're kind of working with Awaken Angels on that. That's really encouraging females to think about business for the first time, those who are in business to think about scaling, how they grow, how they look at those export markets. So our Invest NI staff will be there this weekend as well to support those females.
Oh, thank you. And look, it's great to see, I suppose, the change. And I do recognise as part of this, as I've mentioned, that you're not starting from an equal footing here. You are starting where we've dealt with 100 years of not having regional balance. And being isolated, particularly from the south. So I recognise that it's a very difficult starting point, but there's a clear trajectory there, and there's clearly very positive work going on. So I want to thank you all for that.
Thank you, and I think that is a really important point. Transformative change takes time, and we are putting really good foundations in place. We are working with the business population. We are trying to strengthen that whole ecosystem across that, and I am certain that in years to come we will see that change happen.
Thank you, Patrick. David?
Okay, thank you three for coming in. You talked about building infrastructure. I was talking in the chamber yesterday about manufacturing and that. The south of manufacturing strategy, 85% of those jobs are outside of Dublin, but the infrastructure is in place to allow those businesses to be positioned, and that's sort of part of the issue here is we don't have that major infrastructure in place. Is that one of the major barriers to growth in the regions?
I think one of the critical enablers of regional balance is that property base. There's a really clear market failure. There's a shortage of industrial property for businesses based locally or those who want to come to Northern Ireland to expand. We have had a really ambitious regional property programme approved by the Minister. We are, I suppose, we don't reveal where the sites are that we would be interested in for kind of commercial reasons, but I suppose at this stage we're progressing with 2 of those. So Desert Creek, that's also securing funding from the City and Growth Deal, so another example of where we're really integrating the funding streams and opportunities. And I think Ethna mentioned that's going to be a green innovation park, and then in Mandeville we have existing land that we are, I suppose, upgrading. The planning permissions there haven't been fit for purpose, so that's being upgraded and work will happen there. But your point is valid. There are issues with infrastructure, with wastewater, with electricity connections, with connectivity generally. We work and we engage very regularly with NIE and NI Water to see if we can identify solutions that will work for us, but that remains a challenge.
Yeah. I'll go on to property in a minute, but the infrastructure bit, then it's the engagement the thing I get from business all the time is planning, wastewater. Those are 2 that come up like every time they go to expand. There's restrictions and barriers. Is there work going on then with cross-departmental with DFI as well then to unlock some of this for businesses? Or? from the department. Yeah.
We have kind of regular engagement with the DFI and arrange these issues. There's no, it's no surprise to DFI that these are issues.
Yeah.
The Minister from DFI wrote around to highlight the importance of these things to the economy. We don't have a budget agreed. You know, as you'll be aware, it's a difficult position for all ministers to plan in, but it is something we keep in regular engagement with DFI on these things, keep in regular contact on what the issues that are coming up on those sites are.
It's a solution to it. I remember I've been in Dundalk, I've said a couple of times in here, I've been in Dundalk several times down at the business park they built. They built the south of taking a model of plug and play. So they've taken that model, made planning really simple, pre-approved effectively planning, had the park all ready to go, and then just split up, and it's very fast for business. We don't have that or anywhere close to the ability to that. Is there any progress to move towards that same model?
Well, I think in terms of Desert Crete, I mean, the ambition there is to have a plug and play solution where the infrastructure is in place, or, you know, at the most technologically affordable, I suppose, is there, you know, green infrastructure to allow companies to come purchase a site which is ready, and that's typically how we would build out our industrial estates. So we would typically leave the infrastructure in place. I suppose that the challenge for us at the moment is that our industrial estates, I mean, it's a good challenge, you know, they've been heavily in demand, and our industrial land, we recognise the need for 300 to 400 additional acreage of land. So that our property strategy, we aim between 2024 and 2034. Firstly, obviously, to build out, you know, the priorities at the moment are Desert Crete and Mandeville, obviously, because we have funding to do that. But longer term, we would have ambitions within our property strategy to look at options like, you know, leaving the infrastructure in place, to look at going towards maybe that advanced factory model that you will have seen evidenced in the south of Ireland.
I've got two questions. I'll do the land in a second. But I was with the business last week, and it took over a year actually, to get planning permission for their business to expand. That kills investment. Absolutely kills the size. 12 weeks. So we can talk about, you know, land and everything else, and I will in a second, but unless we change the fundamental dial on how you actually, once you've purchased one, wherever it is, you can actually get onto it quickly and move. That's a problem.
Well, listen, I can take that away, and we can write back to the committee on the specifics on what's going on in planning to improve the system.
That would be useful. Just on the thing, I have to raise my own area. Like in Valley, we've no land, so we've zero land left from investing. Blair's is sitting ready, zoned, but there's 272 acres of land sold and purchased in the last decade, and there's been zero land bought in my area moving forward. So how you know, we're talking aspirational, we're wanted to, but why has that been allowed to happen?
From a property strategy, we have that property strategy agreed, published and agreed with the Minister. There are budget constraints there that prevent us from being able to proceed with that strategy, and look, we don't reveal where we are interested in buying land, but really that is a budget constraint issue at the moment.
You can't put jobs anywhere around wherever that area is if there's no land to put them on, and that is fundamentally the
It's an issue both the LEPs in Lisburn and Castlereagh and ABC have raised, and they're taking forward projects to address that as well. So there are some live developments on that.
Listen, I'm happy. If we can get that back from the planning stuff, that'll be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, and Alison, welcome. Nice to have all of you here. I was going to ask about R&D, and a lot of that has already been covered by Sinead. Helen McCarthy was in committee before and talking about how we have a really big problem attracting sufficient research funding, and I think the innovation panel is doing really good work. But just really to hear your thoughts on how we can do more to diffuse a culture of kind of investing in R&D across all of Northern Ireland. So you've talked about some of the really good things that you're doing, but what more collectively can we be doing to kind of boost this?
I think we do a lot collectively. You know, we're a small region, so as players in that region, we're all really locally connected. So we would work really closely with the universities. We would work with Helen McCarthy and the whole UKRI when they have pots of funding available. So I think the foundations are in place there where we're much more connected. Helen talked about putting Northern Ireland PLC first almost, and I think that's a new way, a new approach for all of us to engage on that, to make sure that, you know, it's not as agencies chasing different funding streams, but actually collectively and collaboratively we're working together to ensure the best outcomes for the entire region, the entire country.
Thank you. So much of this has been covered already. The one thing that came up from someone I was talking to was from Enterprise NI, and I know this is probably separate to you, but just keen to kind of know your thoughts. They had a piece out yesterday about how the NI Enterprise Support Service, there's no kind of clear path for it beyond March 2027, and they feel like we've got this urgent window of 8 to 12 weeks to kind of get everyone together to co-design. There's so many changes coming. Is that anything you've been engaging on? What can we do about this?
So that's the primary kind of entrepreneurship support is Go Succeed, which is obviously run through councils. Enterprise and I are one of the providers on that service, so they're well aware of all the funding issues. So as with all projects that were funded under the Shared Prosperity Fund, that got a cut in funding, and so there was worries about the kind of sustainability of that. They are running that service to March 27 because the Local Growth Fund kind of gave some funding. I'm sure you're aware the voluntary and community sector was also cut heavily. So that is running to 27. I know Belfast City Council, which lead for the councils on procurement, is engaged with providers around the future of the service and, you know, potential future procurement. They also met the Minister, Enterprise and I also met the Minister lately just on those points. In terms
this isn't something that your teams are...
No, we are very engaged.
You're engaged with them.
We're engaged with Belfast City Council and other councils on this, around Go Succeed. That having the right support at the entry level is really important for getting businesses to every other stage.
So important in terms of regional balance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And then the final thing I was going to say is I represent Belfast, but I most of what I know about regional balance is from Sinead being on this committee. But I think sometimes it's a buzzword and it's not always very clear to the public. You know, if someone from Fermanagh is tuning in right now, how do they understand what regional balance is, and how do they see actual tangible changes? You know, and I think how would you? I thought the start, Alison, of your presentation was really good in explaining what regional balance is. But if you're explaining to someone who isn't part of this world, and who wants to understand exactly what it is you're doing, how would you simplify and say, you know, what your vision for regional balance is and what's kind of being done by Invest in relation to it?
I think from our perspective, regional balance is that in every area of Northern Ireland, Belfast or any other region, there is access to good jobs, good employment, and that there's a thriving economy with local businesses that are locally and internationally owned. And that's really about as simple as it can be. And from our perspective, what we are trying to do is really focus on, I suppose, 3 key areas. So as I said to Sinead, the first is about supporting entrepreneurs, those people who are going to be our future employers, those who want to start businesses. They tend to anchor where they're from and employ people locally and grow and scale locally from that to international markets. We want to support those entrepreneurs who already have businesses wherever they are in Northern Ireland to grow, to look at external sales, exports, increase their employment. And then we want to support inward investment into Northern Ireland. Inward investment is important, but as a small country, there will only be so many projects that we can attract into Northern Ireland. So from my perspective and from a lot of the work that we're doing right across Invest NI, those first 2 are really, really important, and the inward investment remains important. But I think that the main drivers are going to be working with us local entrepreneurs and businesses to grow and scale. And I suppose not to miss that a lot of the international firms that are already located here, It's working with them to encourage them to expand. And I think the statistics show that something like 60% of international firms based in Northern Ireland go on to reinvest and expand and grow their base from Northern Ireland to service markets around the world.
And I suppose maybe if I just add to that, because I know you did mention the man in the street in Fermanagh, and if I know the men in the street in Fermanagh, they will want more businesses, more pounds in their pockets to spend, and more visibility of Invest Northern Ireland within their communities. And that's what we do, that's what we want to do. And we want businesses to reach out, and whether it's ourselves, whether it's councils, whether it's enterprise agencies, or whether it's their local colleges, we want businesses to know that there's someone there to support them, to help them to grow, and to help them to be more productive and to make more money.
Okay, thank you. And it kind of all circles back to Padraig's point. That was one thing that you sometimes think in terms of regional balance when it's historic kind of underinvestment. You want to see ambition and you want to see huge change quickly, but you have to start somewhere, and it's this work that
and there is a real
it.
culture shift and change in Invest Northern Ireland to really drive that regional balance. There really is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Declan?
Thanks, Philip. I have two questions, and I'm going to go very local on both. The Antrim Technology Park was disposed, the land acreage was disposed of in 2022. So can you tell me how was the revenue generated from that sale ploughed back into the local economy within the South Antrim area?
So I don't know the specifics of that particular business park, but typically if we dispose of land, that money goes back to the central pot in Department for Economy. And is deployed.
There are sort of DOF rules about, what it's counted as in terms of if you make a profit on the sale or anything like that.
Sure.
But we can probably come back to you on the detail of
If
that.
you would, please, that would be great. And then related to that, we've two really successful enterprise parks in South Antrim. One in Mollusk and one in Antrim Town. They do great work. And I'm curious to know what kind of a relationship do you maintain with both of the projects at Mollusk and in Antrim?
So the enterprise agencies are on all of the local economic partnerships, so they'll be represented on the Antrim and Newtownabbey LEA, which I think was one of the first ones to get going. So there's some good projects in that plan around workspace as far as I know, so that keeps a close tie between recognising the value that those enterprise agencies bring to the area, to provide good space for businesses to start and grow and, if necessary move on, but that clustering effect of businesses being together, in those enterprise agencies is really powerful.
Yeah, I suppose I can't speak to the specifics of those two enterprise agencies, but I can speak to the specifics of Cookstown, Dungannon, Workspace, Oma Enterprise and Enniskillen, which is the region, and we would have ongoing contact. Our staff will meet businesses in the enterprise agencies, we'll meet the enterprise agency managers on an ongoing basis. We're continually talking to them about referrals, and similarly they're putting clients to us for business support. So it's they are very much part of the wider support network, and they're critical components within it. So we have ongoing close working relationships at all times with all of the enterprise agencies and indeed with the ENI across Northern Ireland. So I can't speak to those specific relationships, but they're very important players in that early stage business development space.
So, as well as the revenue generated from the disposal of the enterprise park, and coming back on that particular point, specifically with regard to underpinning the economic plans for the constituency for the borough, Antrim and Newtownabbey Council Borough. Could you also come back to me in relation to the nature of the relationship that is maintained with those two particular enterprises? They work very, very closely together. They are plugged in, as you say. but I'm keen to see them flourish in the time ahead with as much support as
I
possible.
think Mollusk had a report out on the value they bring to the area.
Yes, that's
just
right.
lately. Yeah, so yeah, they are
And
very.
their chief executive has just been appointed to your board. So.
Yeah,
Jane.
correct. Emma.
Okay, Declan, thank you. If I could just ask a few questions. Firstly, Alison, as I said at the start, congratulations on your recent appointment. And I was particularly struck by the remark that you made in relation to culture and culture change within Invest Northern Ireland. You may be aware that that has attracted some commentary and scrutiny, not least in the Belfast Telegraph yesterday in an opinion piece by a former Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Department for the Economy. So I'm just keen to see, first of all, what is your role? It's a nice title, but what does it actually mean? And what culture changes have we seen in Invest Northern Ireland, and what are you planning to do? You know, Invest Northern Ireland historically has been the jewel in the crown of the economic growth here in Northern Ireland and has played a vital role. There is commentary now that it has somewhat lost its way and has got away from that main aim of growing Northern Ireland economy, when, regardless of where, in my view, investment takes place in Northern Ireland, that is a good thing. So I want to know what work we have done to try and rebuild the reputation of Invest Northern Ireland, both here in Northern Ireland for local firms, but also across the globe, as an enterprise delivery agency that can be trusted, that can deliver, and rather than focus on internal politics or staffing matters within their own organisation, their focus is on delivering for the people of Northern Ireland.
And it is disappointing to read articles
Sure.
like that.
Don't worry, I read articles criticising me all the time. Don't worry.
So you asked in terms of my role, so I did mention this at the start, but I appreciate
No
your
apologies.
absence. So I am part of that executive leadership
Yes.
team within Invest Northern Ireland, and I have responsibility for our regional development agenda. So that includes all of our regional business group, our land and property, and then a new client solutions group. And that client solutions group brings together all of our teams in innovation, research and development, entrepreneurship, green economy and energy efficiency, cluster development, operational excellence, supply chain development, and then leadership and skills.
That small portfolio.
That small portfolio. So it's that full area where all of our clients, whether they be SMEs or new potential SMEs or the big, large companies that need support, our client-facing staff are working with them to identify what are the challenges, what are the barriers to growth, what are the opportunities, and then what have we got within all of those teams in terms of information, advice, guidance, connecting to other providers of support, or what financial support can we give. So I suppose that sums that role up. You mentioned there or asked about the culture change. So yes, it is a whole new leadership team that, Kieran Donoghue, our new chief executive there. I had engaged with Invest Northern Ireland in prior roles. I see it internally as a really different organisation. It is full of very warm, engaging, knowledgeable people who want to work hard for the economy right across Northern Ireland. Our client-facing staff are out every day engaging with businesses who are already working with us, engaging with businesses who want to work with us. And that includes teams right across the world as well. We have international offices, and I was fortunate enough to travel to Toronto last month with a group of businesses, and I saw firsthand, even in Toronto, we had a client out there who, our member of staff in Toronto, was able to set them up a really important business meeting, and that looks like that's going to be a new deal for that business based in Belfast. So that work is continuing right around the world for companies that are based here to help them access those international markets, but also we've teams obviously promoting Northern Ireland and all of our value proposition here to firms across the globe. And typically we would maybe have prioritised or focused on the US, but we've firms from Australia, from Germany, from India, from the Cayman Islands, right across the world have located in Northern Ireland.
And in terms of communication of that work, from my viewing of it, I believe that Invest NI was previously better at promoting the work that it done for the Northern Ireland economy, and I have no doubt that everyone that works for Invest Northern Ireland is committed and is making a real difference every single day, but I'm just not seeing that as much as I used to. Has there been any consideration given to how we communicate with the people of Northern Ireland about the vital work that Invest Northern Ireland is doing on a day and daily basis?
Yes, is the short answer to that. Of course, we want everybody in Northern Ireland to be doing and seeing actually and benefiting from the good work that we're doing. We have extensive reach on all of our social media platforms, extensive engagement. We try to engage with press. Even our heads of regions recently are working on kind of thought leadership articles, really just to raise that awareness of who Invest NI are and what we do. So yes, I take your point. There's always more and better that we should be doing to really communicate that good story of Invest NI.
I think I regularly see your video sponsored into my social media promoting job and opportunities. So I may look at that. Gilly, I just wanted to touch base in relation to the local economic partnerships. So Minister Murphy, some considerable time ago, outlined his sub-regional economic plan and his vision, and the key component of that was the local economic partnerships. That was some 19 months ago.
October 24, I think.
October 24. Progress on that, from my perspective, has been very, very slow. This was the flagship within that report and within that vision. I, at the time, disagreed with the characterisation of outside of Belfast as the BMAP area. I don't believe that somebody that lives in Toome sees himself as living in Belfast, but listen, I lost that argument, and that's fine. But at a time with budget difficulties, at a time when resources are stretched, and I commend the Minister for securing £45 million to that, the lack of spend and delivery on that to date is not, in my view, acceptable. I've done quick calculations. So of the 45 million announced in October 2024, £343,000 has been spent. Is that right?
Slightly, but it's over 400,000.
Over 400,000. Anyway, so
just
so less than 1%.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a bit of context if you don't mind.
Yeah,
so
of course.
It's a 3-year fund. So we started with I said in my opening thing. So we started with a flat profile of 15 million in each year,
across the 3 years.
And then we've been working with councils to update that profile because, as you'll know, for most projects, you don't really see a flat profile. It tends to be an initial phase and then greater delivery. So yes, the phase this year, spend has been primarily around staff time. There's been some delivery, or I said this year, last financial year. There's been some spend, and that also reflects councils have spent their own resources on significant areas of work over the last year. So, for example, we didn't pay for any consultancy. Councils spent their own resources on that. Some councils didn't spend any resources of ours on staff time. They just paid for that themselves. But that initial planning phase will really pay dividends over the next year or two. And that has been required really to let partnerships come up with what are the right projects in the area, what are the right priorities. So I said in my opening remarks, Belfast's plan was approved with the Minister yesterday, which is probably of particular interest to you. So we are making good progress, and I do think we'll see an awful lot of delivery over the next year or two.
That was the year 1 plan from Belfast that was approved?
No, it's the
action plan?
Yeah.
Okay. Just in the document that was provided to us at page 26, it says action plan not yet submitted to the department. So how could the Minister sign off on it if it hasn't been?
Yes, so, over the last week, essentially, it was submitted. We got it approved very quickly. We try and move as quickly as we can once things are in. We're on all the LEPs, so we have a good idea what's coming to us generally. So,
and what is that profile of the 44.6 million look like then over the remaining 2 years?
Yeah. So most of this. So there's about 16 million in the forecast for next financial year, and then about 21 in the year after that, and then some tails of expenditure in a year 4. So it's kind of good planning to not to have a cold stop sometimes, just because some projects go on. So we're planning still it's still that same level of spend. It's just the profile has changed over the years.
And has that profile between capital and revenue changed?
No, it's still 2/3 capital.
2/3 capital. And then do you see the majority of capital then delivered in year 3 at that 21 million?
Yeah. So it depends on the area. So any of the, say the industrial land or anything like that is going to have a longer lead time. So I would say that is kind of year 3 activity. Some councils have capital grants, so like the Derry City and Strabane grants that launched today I mentioned. You could see those would be delivered, this year. So it sort of depends what the project is, but yeah, if councils have put a lot of capital in a big chunky land project, then that's more likely to be year 3. Whereas if there's more of those smaller grant projects, it'll be this year probably.
Has the Belfast City Council letter of offer been sent by the department?
Plan was approved yesterday. I haven't been in the office yet this morning, but I don't think we've sent out the letter of offer yet. But
now that plan has been approved, is that available to the public to see?
I'll get in touch with Belfast to see what they'd be happy to share with the committee.
Okay.
It's just to give you an overview. There's one project that focuses on screen, kind of the creative screen businesses. There's one project that focuses on kind of more broader creative industries, and then there's one that focuses on entrepreneurship. So there's a big difference between all the plans. Like Belfast is one of the shorter ones,
yes.
And they have about 700k that they haven't yet allocated. So it's
Perfect. And then Alison, finally, just for me, is in terms of industrial land / business parks that are already in the ownership of Invest Northern Ireland vis-a-vis regional property fund and looking to develop more. So take Glenbank, let's take the Mackey's site owned by Invest Northern Ireland, or a more advanced one, let's take Global Point, which has been relatively a huge success. There doesn't seem to be profile or funding for business parks that are already in place that have a proven track record of delivery and which could expand and have interest, vis-a-vis trying to develop from the very outset or from the start under the regional property fund places where there are no current Invest Northern Ireland portfolios. So how do we match that balance between already using assets that we have rather than leaving them vacant, and also given the fact that particularly in relation to Global Point there is demand for businesses queuing out the door to get in there, but Invest have not profiled any funding to that to match the demand that's in place?
Yeah, so to give you assurance, we've got a really dedicated property team who will work with businesses who are doing property searches to understand what their needs are, what they might need and want, so they can direct clients and businesses to available land. That property strategy that we have in place requires funding. There are funding constraints right across Northern Ireland. So, we maintain our business parks, we actively try to promote and sell that land where possible, but those future phases and the expansion of that full regional property programme, unfortunately we haven't been able to follow through with that.
Is the current budget, although clearly not one yet agreed, in terms of the draft budget, previously the regional property fund had 0 allocated to it, is that still the case?
As you know, there isn't a budget, I suppose.
In the draft budget that the minister...
I'm not over what the details were in terms of the... It was not enough. I know that much. Yeah.
My understanding, but I'm happy to come back and clarify this, is that there's not ring fence money available for property in the draft budget.
That was my understanding too, but we can check. Okay, and then finally, Jonathan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just checking you can hear me.
Yeah, loud and clear, sir.
Thanks very much for your presentation this morning. I'm sure if you've been listening into the committee over its deliberations over the past year or more, you'll understand that regional balance means so much more than just Belfast and Londonderry to many of us. Many of us look and value other parts of our country and think that there's a need for balance when it comes to investment, foreign direct investment, but also recognizing that each individual area has specific specialties and needs, and therefore for an appropriately regionally balanced economy, it's important to reflect each of those areas. So talking specifically, and it's been mentioned, I think, by Declan, by Philip, and indeed even by David, about the need for land availability, something ABC has quite an abundance of. And I particularly think of the Mandeville site, in which was mentioned by you in your presentation, a site of 95 acres in central Craigavon. It is without doubt a strategic asset, both for the Northern Ireland economy, but also indeed for Invest NI. And, your chief executive has talked about its importance regionally and indeed wider for foreign direct investment. In July 2025, he told the ABC Council and indeed elected representatives of the need for increased collaboration with NIE, with NI Water and other providers to ensure the site was fit for purpose. He talked of £10 million that were going to be invested over the next 12 to 18 months. So that was in July 2025. That's nearly coming on for a full 12 months. To meet that objective of having a site with £10 million invested, ensuring that it's open then for foreign direct investment and wider business development, how far are we on that timescale to completing on the project?
We are progressing with that project. We have an integrated consultancy firm in contract with us working on the development of that land. What we're having to progress through is planning permission, because I guess the policy and contextual change means that the planning permission in place is no longer fit for purpose. We want this to be a future focused business park, so that planning process will be ongoing. I don't have the timescales to hand, Jonathan, happy to come back on those specifically, but to give you an assurance that that is a priority project within our property division and we are progressing that actively.
Okay, do you have any indication of how much money has been spent to date on the site? I think at that time in July 2025 there was in the region of 0.5 million that had been spent on the site by Invest, and I'm just wondering where we are to date.
Sorry, I don't have that information with me. Sorry.
Would it be possible then that you would supply the committee with the full spend so far, an outline of timescales and when the 10 million will be invested, and also an update of where we are on planning so that we can ensure that this project keeps moving?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. And colleagues, if there's no further questions at this stage, can I thank the witnesses on behalf of the committee, and thank you for your ongoing work, and we look forward to staying in touch. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chair, can I?
Of course.
Sorry, just kind of in summary of that, I'm really concerned again at the reference of activity and volume as the regional balance target, as the only regional balance target. I think it is misleading at best and disingenuous, but or at worst, it's deliberately skewing results. So once again, I think it's really important that Invest NI publish targets around investment, jobs promoted, and also productivity improvement. That has to be part of the measurements of regional balance, because the other is actually meaningless.
Anybody else want to? Sorry, that Peter, maybe you summarise, and then we can see if there's anything missing.
So, Chairperson, the committee consent to write to the department, just picking up the other things first, the use of tourism innovation vouchers, the initiatives that the department is undertaking to address planning issues and thus promote investments. The question that Mr. Kearney asked about the disposal of Antrim Technology Park, and also the support that is being provided for enterprise parks at Mollusk and at Antrim. Further information on the Belfast Action Plan and the budget for the regional property programme, or the anticipated budget for the regional property programme, as well as the spend and timescales for the Mandeville project, including an update on the planning issues. And presumably, if members are okay with those, they also want to indicate, as Ms McLaughlin just said, to indicate the committee's belief that Invest NI should publish regional balance targets which include jobs promoted, productivity, rather than just activity.
Investment as well, the value of investment.
Great, Chairperson.
Is there anything else, colleagues? No? Okay then, if we move on to our next item, which is item 7, which is widening participation in higher education. The committee will now receive evidence from the department in respect of higher education, widening participation, consultation, feedback, and I welcome colleagues from the department and hand over to you whenever you're ready.
Chair and members, thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today to provide an update on the review of widening participation in higher education and the recent consultation. My name is Annette Palmer. I am the Interim Director of Strategic Policy and Services within the Department for the Economy, and I am joined today by Davina McKay and Joanne McGlone, who have been instrumental in leading on this work. At the outset, I do want to recognise and thank those who have contributed to this work. It has genuinely been a collaborative process. involving our higher education providers and a wide range of partners through the stakeholder engagement network, including employers, voluntary and community organisations and representative bodies. Their insight and challenge have been central to shaping these proposals. I want to particularly acknowledge the contribution of learners themselves. We have engaged directly with school pupils, students and adult returners. These were often very open and at times difficult conversations. It can feel quite exposing to speak about those personal barriers and lived experience, but those contributions were invaluable. I was struck in particular by how clearly and thoughtfully younger learners articulated the challenges they face. There was a very clear call to action in what we heard, one I think we can all recognise and get behind. Widening participation is first and foremost about fairness, ensuring that individuals from underrepresented and disadvantaged backgrounds can access, succeed in and benefit from higher education. It is about recognising and addressing the barriers that can limit opportunity, but also fundamentally important to our economy. It is central to delivering the Minister's economic vision, which places inclusive growth and equitable opportunity at its core. A system that enables more people to succeed in higher education helps build the skilled, productive and resilient workforce that our economy requires. When we talk about widening participation, we are moving beyond a narrow focus on access alone. The approach we are developing reflects a broader ambition, supporting learners to access, succeed in and progress beyond higher education into meaningful outcomes. This reflects both the evidence and what we have heard through engagement. The need to change was informed by research and the work of the Widening Participation Forum, and while participation has increased over time, persistent inequalities remain, particularly for those from disadvantaged backgrounds, rural communities and those with lower prior attainment. The consultation therefore set out proposals for a refreshed, more holistic and system-wide approach. There are a number of areas where the proposed approach reflects a shift in emphasis. These include a stronger focus on the full learner journey, clearer prioritisation of groups most at risk of disadvantage, a more coordinated and collaborative model of delivery across the system and a greater emphasis on outcomes, particularly progress into employment and good jobs comparable to peers. Importantly, the consultation also recognises the need to balance ambition with deliverability, and we will continue to work closely with the WP Forum and our stakeholder engagement network to ensure we can achieve this together. In terms of where we are now, responses to the consultation are being analysed and are informing the development of policy options for the Minister's consideration, alongside a supporting implementation framework. We have seen strong support for the overall direction of travel, along with valuable feedback on areas such as prioritisation, deliverability and the practicalities of implementation. We would very much welcome the committee's views as this work progresses. Your feedback will be an important part of shaping the final policy direction, ensuring that what we take forward is both ambitious and delivers real impact for learners. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this important work. You talk about overall direction, so what is the overall direction that the department is trying to go on this?
So I think for us, it's very clearly moving it beyond access alone. So access to success is very much about getting students into higher education. But when we've done our engagement, it's very clear that access, while very, very important and still a very significant step, is the first step. We need to look at what support WP students need while they're at a higher education setting, and actually in terms of outcomes, comparable to their peers. So some evidence would suggest, for example, that those with a disability with the same qualification could potentially be underemployed. So we want to work with employers and our higher education institutions to make that outcomes piece more visible and more impactful for our learners.
And are there any proposed changes to the priority groups?
Yes, so we have a number of changes to the priority groups. Just into my pack here. So priority groups are really about those underrepresented and those facing additional barriers. We have taken forward a more thematic model, recognising that you're not just one thing. There are going to be multiple characteristics. So you could be from a deprived background but also have a disability. You could be living in a rural area. So we have taken the 4 priority groups that we currently have and mapped those across.
Mind the committee what those 4 are?
Yeah, so adult returners, those from quintile 1, care experienced and
Learners with disabilities.
thank you very much, learners with disabilities. So those are the 4 priority groups that we currently have. Those are still going to be retained within that framework, but we're also recognising those additional characteristics. So we have socioeconomic and geographical disadvantage.
What's the difference between socio-economic deprived and Q1 that you would...
So quintile 1 would fall within that. So in terms of that framework, when we talk about socioeconomic and geographical disadvantage, that would include quintile 1, rural learners, and for example, maybe young Protestant males would fall into that section. Those personal circumstances and care experience then would be another thematic group. That would be care experienced, carers, and those potentially who are estranged from their parents. Educational and learning needs, that would include disabled students, those adult returners, maybe gender, people who require additional support in terms of special educational needs. And then a new one would be justice and economic disengagement. That would include those with experience of the justice system, including survivors of domestic violence, and maybe family members who've been involved in the justice system as well, those at risk of homelessness, and those NEET adjacent youth. So those would be the 4.
They'll be the new ones. Have you given any... so that's obviously quite wide but important. So are we getting to a stage where we're prioritising so many people that actually...
So what we have is
everyone is a priority. And
yeah. So in terms of the task and finish group that took forward this work, we did have a significant list of groups that would seek additional support. What we're hoping to do more is in terms of the targeting with institutions. So whenever we set our targets, for example, we would work with that institution to say, in terms of your locality and your need and how well you're performing in certain groups, what are the particular targets that you're going to address, and we would set that with the institution for the following year, and we would work with them on that. So I think it's rather than having a broad 4 targets, which are still important, that everybody must adhere to, it is, here's the important priority groups, and within this locality, for example, travellers might be a priority group, or in another locality we might want to do specific work with refugees. So it would depend on the needs of that institution and that institutional experience.
how much does the department currently spend per annum on
WP? So, WP funding isn't a budget allocation, it's a top slice, so 10% of additional fee income is invested, and that's around 10 million per annum.
And is there any proposed changes to that?
No.
Okay. So how do we expand the service without increasing the budget?
I
Because
think
you've also said it's not just going to be additional priority groups, but there's also going to be additional services as well. So how do we do both with no additional money?
so what we were hoping to do, well, there's 2 parts of that. I think within the funding envelope we have to make sure that the money is working for us. I think it's very clear that we have really good institutions, they work very closely together, and it's about building on that collaboration. There's really good examples in the Northwest, for example, of Northwest Regional College and Ulster University delivering with the community some fantastic examples of partnership working to reach underrepresented groups. But there will be a review of student support, for example, and you know, while it's not within the scope of this consultation, all of the feedback that we have received in relation to the financial barriers will be fed into that.
And finally from me, do you have any concerns of any policies that the department are pursuing or decisions that they're taking that will actually be counterproductive to widening participation? The reason I ask is later in our committee pack, and there's a letter from Queen's University dated the 28th of May 2026 in relation to the budget provided by the Permanent Secretary. And on page 2 of that it states that they're going to be required to cut 700 student places, which will disproportionately impact young people from disadvantaged and widening participation backgrounds. So given that this is very vital and important work, are we not pursuing a policy in the department that on the one hand we're paying Peter and on the other hand we're robbing Paul?
I would say in terms of that 10%, that is ring fenced. So that WP funding is ring fenced, and it is there, and it can't be used for anything else. I haven't actually seen that letter, Chair, so I'm not exactly sure what that relates to, but I can definitely ask HE colleagues.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you for your presentation. And look, obviously a very vital piece of work and something that's core to the Minister's vision is about widening participation, increasing access and increasing opportunities right across the board. So 2 points from me. The first one's around engagement with FE and HE. The second one is just around the targets, the metrics, focus and what that looks like. So in terms of question one, you obviously have a key role in engaging with the institutions. You've mentioned a great example in the Northwest, which obviously I'm very familiar with as a rep for Derry, and I do think that that's a really good example. Has there been any other good practice that you've seen from institutions, and what engagement has there been with community organisations as well? Because I'm conscious that they have a critical role in this as well as our statutory institutions as well.
So I'll maybe ask Joanne just to give you a bit of a flavour of the engagement that we've had with HE and FE. So we have an engagement forum, and we also have the WP forum. So we have a wider stakeholder network, and we have an engagement forum. We have, I don't know, Joanne, if you want to kind of give out some dates on that.
Yes, we have a WP forum which kicked off on the 7th of November 2022, and the standing members are members of the universities and the colleges. The WP forum meets on a quarterly basis. We also have a stakeholder engagement network. So the members of the network were invited to participate in a programme of regional and targeted engagement events. So in April and May 2024, we facilitated a series of regional focus groups taking place in Belfast, Southwest, Southeast, Northwest, and 2 sessions online. So we've had wide representation from members of the community and voluntary sector, and they have been providing input to our proposals.
And in terms of best practice, you know, our institutions publish their widening access and participation plans on their websites, but I can give you a flavour of some of the fantastic work they do. Community Plus, as part of that ask for McGee, it was the one that I was referring to, and that's a five-week supported pathway programme for adults, particularly women returners, to understand and navigate routes back into education. And this was delivered by Ulster University, North West Regional College, and the Women's Centre. We've also, you know, that's kind of maybe at the adult end of the spectrum. We also have, for example, Professor Fluffy, who comes out from Queen's University, and that would be very much in that pre-engagement space. So that's an aspiration-raising programme for primary school children, disadvantaged schools, and it builds literacy and confidence and awareness of higher education. It uses interactive learning and mentors. Another really interesting piece of work is the Junior Academy in relation to sports. So that's a targeted strand within QUB's Junior Academy, and it uses sport to engage with young males. It targets year 8 to 10 boys and disengaged learners. So those are campus visits. It's academic links to sports. They do like a level 1 sports leadership award as part of that, just to try and keep those students engaged. Another one, maybe on the business side, would be that graduate boost at Ulster University. It has excellent feedback. So that's targeted employability and transition programme to support students, particularly those with disabilities, move from education into employment, and that's a paid internship. You know, I can keep going. We've got.
I suppose, no, look, really, really useful, and I suppose my focus on the community piece is around community education, which is obviously, and Aontas are here and will touch on this with a lot more expertise than I will, but as around community education as distinct from education just within the community. So I suppose I would be really keen to understand where Aontas fit under that, where Skills Northwest fit under that, where the likes of the Sky Project and Derry, where those sort of organisations fit under this. And how their voice can be heard, because the stakeholder engagement's pivotal, but it's the I suppose it's what we find quite a lot where we have the statutory partners on a different weighting from all our partners, and how we can improve that.
So yes, we work very closely with the Aontas. Actually, they fed into all of this work as we progress through. We can give you specific dates, but I'm conscious of time. We also have a lifelong learning strand. So within the Skills Action Plan, the Minister's made a commitment to engagement with stakeholders in lifelong learning. We had a collaboration clinic January, February time, and Aontas were part of that. And that's really looking at how can we build that community model, and how does that work in terms of, like, from higher education, I would say that those folks are a little bit further away, but actually it's a really important stepping stone and re-engaging people. And how can we work with community organisations, maybe more through our FE partners in the first instance, through to that HE pathway. Tomorrow we have another workshop down in Downpatrick to look at a forward work plan in terms of some of the priorities that we want to take forward over the next 12 months, and Aontas are also coming to that. I would actually like to personally thank Aontas for their really challenging at times and very focused engagement, and I think we have reflected that feedback in this consultation. We very much refer to adult returners. I think the challenges in respect of part-time learning as well, a lot of that voice would have come from organisations like Aontas.
Well, thanks for that. And just finally for me, just in the presentation and being just in what you were setting out, it was just the discussion around the greater focus and sort of more emphasis and stuff. So I suppose to understand the metrics around that, what does that look like? How is it outcome based? Because I'm conscious that when we're changing the priorities, how do we measure how effective we're being on those?
We already have a working group established to look at our widening access and participation plans. I think we have a challenge around data. I think because of those multiple characteristics, we have to be very careful. And we also have to understand that these are people, they're not just numbers. But we do want to make sure that that data is consistently and applied across institutions, because we want to understand and to be able to benchmark across our organisations and delivery partners, but equally in terms of how we're faring across other devolved administrations, for example, and the South. So that data piece is very important. Obviously we report at the minute on those 4 target groups that I mentioned, but when we expand that, we have to be very careful, and I would say it's going to take us maybe a year or two to get all of that data in place. When we look at the data from HISA, it's already 2 years out of date. So when we're getting reported figures in our WP enrolments, which actually, overall in the last 5 years, WP students have increased by 9.7%, and that's really positive. But equally, the most recent data sets we have for that is 22-23. That's been verified. We would like to work on an interim basis, so that we know that our universities and colleges will have interim data. We can go out and work with them on interim data, see where their challenges are, see where the issues are, but then when the 2 years time and that data is verified, we can see if there's any material changes. So we have a working group established. We have a forward work plan for that. We are piloting some of these approaches in year to see what works. I think we have to be really careful though about not putting additional administrative burden on our delivery partners. So this is all funded out of that 10%, and we want to make sure that that 10% funding is on frontline delivery and supporting students, and not necessarily taking up chunks of money and doing reporting and that type of thing. While it's still important, we just want to make sure that it's not adding additional burden.
And I suppose the quantitative part is going to be one part of this, but it's the qualitative data and the student voice in the middle of this that's the key part, really, in terms of evaluation. So in terms of the data that you do seek to capture, whether that be on an interim or on the 24-month basis, is that going to take on both qualitative and quantitative?
Yeah, so one of the proposals we want to take forward is strengthening the role of the Widening Participation Forum, and that would to make sure that we've got learner voice embedded in that. Now we have had quite a lot of engagement with students directly and National Union, Students' Union, and all of those great folks, youth groups and everything have been involved in developing this, but we do need to make sure that that's built into this WP Forum. That WP Forum, we can hold each other to account. We can make sure that we have best practice, we have peer reviews, we have that challenge and constructive voice, and we would want learners at the very heart of that.
Thank you very much indeed. Declan?
Thanks, Philip. So I think it's really important to make the point that they're individuals, they're not stats. That's also a very relevant point to make about not increasing the administrative burden on institutions and staff. Outreach is one thing, and my particular focus here is on adults with learning disabilities, and it has thankfully now become an issue with much greater public attention. Caleb's cause, recognising that there are young people, young adults with disabilities that have been let down by our education department, by our health department, effectively by the entire system. So there is a need to develop measures, innovative measures, where we can expand the pathways to increase participation. But then there is a question arising of, if you successfully statistically increase participation, how do you keep young adults with complex learning needs who have been brought back into the system, within the system, in a way where they benefit from the learning process, where it is pupil and student and individual centred, in a way which ensures that they benefit from the educational process. So having widened participation, having successfully made the outreach, what focus have you got on then ensuring that the learning experience is quality, that it is beneficial, and that those young people do find a pathway through either higher education or the university process? So as opposed to young adults with physical disabilities, how are we going to ensure that young adults, neurodivergent, young adults with ADHD, young adults who fall within that massive category of complex and additional learning needs, that they benefit from the participation? Once you unlock the system and you get them in, how do we ensure that they have a fulfilling educational experience as a result?
There's probably two parts that I'll maybe say something, then hand over to Davina. I think, the pathways is definitely very, very important, and getting, folks from different diverse backgrounds in. I would say there's a role, though, for us in terms of expectations. So we talk about aspirations sometimes for our young people, but that actually can put a lot of emphasis on them, and it's like a deficit discourse because they're lacking in something. It's actually building that culture and building those systems that actually young people with different needs are expected, and we have expectations that they will progress to higher education. That came back in our feedback. So for example, I know a young person with a statement who in a school setting, in one school setting was told, why are you even trying to go and do a transfer test? And then in a different school setting was, well, we actually need to make sure that your teaching assistant is makes yourself redundant because you need to be independent when you go to university. So I think there's that language piece and there's that cultural piece, but in terms of those actual programmes and pathways and support, I don't know if you'd like to add anything, Davina?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of special educational needs, there's obviously a range of provision, and Caleb's cause is focusing probably more on young people who are in a special school setting, and their pathway would be into Department of Health provision, maybe into FE, Skills for Life and Work. What we're looking at is those who have the ability to go to higher education, and it should be a pathway for them. We already have programmes like Graduate Boost, which some of the universities deliver, which is specifically focused on giving that additional support and work experience for young people who have a degree, who already have a degree but have a disability, and neurodivergency falls under that as well. And it's those work placements are really, really valuable, because once you're in a workplace, it's maybe easier to get through the recruitment process. So that's one example. The universities also have some really good under WP. Ulster University has their virtual campus, which sounds very simple, but someone can get familiarised with the campus to take away that fear in terms of both physical disability, but also maybe someone who's neurodivergent and wants to get used to the space before they actually go into it and have that comfort. So there's a range of programmes. We can look at mentoring, at hand-holding support, and then work with employers in terms of maybe alternative recruitment practices, because we know that recruitment it can be tricky. Does that answer your question?
It seems to me that there's almost a need to re-engineer thinking within our educational institutions, universities and so on. It's cultural, it's attitudinal. So the virtual setting that you're describing, great idea, that can break down apprehensions about moving into a different space, a different place. but there is almost a need to re-engineer or sensitise the function and the operation of the institutions to ensure that young people who have successfully been brought into the process are then included within the process, where there's due attention to their particular needs and challenges. And simply because they're in the lecture theatre, because they're in the class, doesn't mean to say that everybody's the same.
I think that's why we want to shift the focus from access into that retention and that support while they're at that setting, and as Davina was saying, into that employer setting as well. That's a huge transition. So it's that additional support in terms of maybe that mentoring and support while they're there. And I have to say, our institutions, our FE and higher education institutions like these, our delivery partners really know their students, and they will work very hard to make sure that they're supported in a way that maybe some of us who are a bit further away wouldn't understand. We do have examples of students maybe not even realising that they were had needs, but actually the lecturer or the person working with them has maybe picked that up. So, our delivery partners work very, very closely with our students, and they would definitely try and support them as best they could. We do want to make sure that there is that additional support and focus as part of the higher education journey, but right through to the outcomes piece and the transition into employment, which can be more challenging for people from neurodiverse backgrounds.
Thanks, Declan. Kate?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. Really, really good presentation, and you're obviously very passionate about this as a subject, and I think the intersectional approach is really good. I think everyone's going to agree with the aims. It's laudable, and you're going to get agreement in it. My issue with this is that I think we can have this conversation, I think we should have this conversation, but I don't understand why it comes now ahead of the HE funding review, which is meant to be holistic. And gives proper consideration about how the department can widen access and participation in our HE institutions. And so I just wonder if you can explain a bit of the thinking around releasing this now ahead of that.
So this work has been going on for a couple of years now. So we have been engaging with stakeholders and running workshops and pulling evidence together for a significant period of time. And there's a lot of things that we can do that don't necessarily require funding changes. So we don't want to wait until everything. We want to get on and start doing what we can and start implementing some of those changes as quickly as we can. Data, for example, and those widening access and participation plans are a good example. So I think what I would say to that, Kate, is that we are very keen to make as much impact as we can and deliver as much as we can in as quickly as we can. And we didn't want to, a future funding review to stop or pause or slow down some of the really good work that we could take forward. But completely appreciate that student support will be a big part of that review. And I know colleagues are going to be up to speak to you in a couple of weeks about that. And all of the information that we have gathered has been fed into those colleagues. So that's probably the only other piece I could add.
And it's not a criticism on you, it's on the department. I think if we're trying to think about kind of, especially when you look at QUB and UU and the squeezes there and the really important programs, we need to understand the wider vision and funding model for it. So, but thank you, and I appreciate that's not your area. You talked about lifelong learning and covered Declan's point. The final thing I wanted to ask about is childcare, and it's our economy relies on it, and I keep hearing from PhD students who are really struggling. What consideration has been given to this as part of the consultation and strategy development going forward?
Yes, so childcare would definitely be, and I'll hand over to Davina, who's the expert on this, but yes, childcare is definitely an issue that has come up. I know that there's an awful lot of provision already in place. So, for example, we've got Care to Learn in an FE setting. There are a number of supports that are available for parents, and I'll let Davina maybe go into a little bit more detail on some of those.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Kate. It's fundamental if we want someone who has a child or children to be able to work or study. They need to have the children looked after. And as Annette said, there is a core set of funding. There's the wider Northern Ireland subsidy scheme, which the Department of Education delivers. Obviously, that's linked to tax-free childcare and supports employers.
When you're PhD students, you can't avail of this.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that. What I would say in terms of the wider childcare piece, the departments are working closely together. So that work, we had lots of focused discussions for the development of the consultation on the childcare strategy. That work isn't going to end, and that collaboration isn't going to end. So as we get feedback in terms of ability to study and those gaps in terms of postgraduate and PhD students, that will be fed back through and to see under that wider strategy piece. In terms of support for students, there is support available to help pay for your childcare. Mostly if you're full-time, we know there are gaps in terms of part-time, and that is in scope of the funding review. And again, as Annette said, any feedback we're getting through this process is being fed through to colleagues. But we are aware that while there is support there, it isn't perfect.
Yeah. So we would say there's the childcare grant, parents, learning allowance, and adult dependence grant. But again, those targeted grants are going to be looked at as part of that wider review.
Great. Final thing I'd say is I chair the all-party group on policy and public data, and we look at how we use large administrative sets to create policy solutions that work for the future as well as now. And it's if you've got responsible data scientists handling it, that alleviates a lot of the concerns, but it allows us to craft things. So if any of your team is interested in coming along to this, you'd be very welcome, because I think there's a lot of crossover that could happen.
Okay. That would be really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sinead?
Thank you very much. You've answered quite a bit of the questions I was going to ask, but you just raised something there at the minute when you were responding to Kate around the childcare, which is fundamental. There's a lot of learners that are part-time learners, and there are significant barriers, particularly to them, against access to maintenance loans and grants for living costs. Can you talk us through some of the responses around that? Because we do discuss lifelong learning, and it is a particular hazard to participate on a part-time basis when those barriers are in place.
So very much adult and part-time learners were a strong theme coming through that consultation. We are explicitly trying to move towards a more flexible lifelong learning approach. Adult returners are named within that priority framework. And in terms of part-time, part-time learners have access to some fee support, but not generally the same maintenance support for living costs. Now we say generally because they can access some pieces of support. So there's discretionary hardship funds, there's targeted institutional support, but certain benefit interactions can come into play there as well. So at the moment, they cannot access maintenance loans or grants. They do access part-time fee grants, part-time tuition fee loans, and part-time course grants. But I think we'd be very much of the view that would need to be considered. It impacts very much on our HE and FE learners. Also in terms of that employer piece around upskilling and reskilling, I think in particular for WP students, a lot of our students may have had caring responsibilities, or they're not also in employment and trying to study. So it's recognising that, and as Kate had mentioned, they could have had childcare issues. So it's trying to be more flexible and bring that more open. Open University would do an awful lot of work in terms of our that flexible learning piece, and that's a really successful model that we have seen develop in partnership with our further education colleges. So yes, something that's very much fed back as part of the consultation process.
What would be the age profile of the part-time learners? Have you got a medium age profile of those part-time and broken down to gender as well?
Joanne is our data expert. Now, we might not have it to hand. Is that something we have today?
I don't have it to hand, but off the top of my head, I do know that the majority of part-time learners are adult returners, so their age is 25 and over. With regards to the gender breakdown, I don't have that to hand, but I can get that for you.
It'd just be interesting because a lot of women are carers or have caring roles, so it would be significant to them that we look at that widening participation for those.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I would just add as well that the role of our FE colleges in terms of delivering higher education is really key in terms of that access for someone. You don't have to go to one of the main institutions, although you have the option of OU, but it's trying to spread that
That
regional balance piece and access for rural learners as well, just to make it as easy as possible.
Just on that, in relation to schools, has our career advisors in schools, have they got the training on the widening participation support? And how do you ensure that they're up to date with absolutely everything that is available to potential students that will be coming along? Because I think it's fundamental from, you know, they're choosing their next stage after GCSEs, that they see themselves as a student in the institutions in Northern Ireland. So what training are you giving the careers advisors?
So our careers advisors do work closely with school staff, both to identify pupils who may have barriers to education, and also they do one-to-one career guidance interventions. So if they identify a young person, they will prioritise them if they have particular barriers. Those careers advisors do provide information, advice and guidance to each of those people to identify specific pathways that would best match their circumstance. So the Career Service also would work very closely with the Health and Social Care Trust, the Youth Justice Agency and the Education Authority in terms of that transition service to support our young people who are supporting barriers. Some of the practical examples, there's a 3-day WP Open Day at Ulster University on the McGee campus coming up in relation to pathways to education, training, employment, education roadshow. It's a catchy title. And that will be to really support those care experienced young people and parents and guardians and trust staff to realise in terms of care experience, for example, what exactly is accessible, because they do get additional support. There's also a career, they publish a guide to career entry routes, and that includes an overview of the higher education application process and how to apply for financial assistance and other support. That is updated every year. It's updated in advance of exam results, and it's shared with schools, area learning communities and the Northern Ireland Schools and Colleges Association. So they do a significant amount of work with schools and with the young people directly.
That's the Northern Ireland Careers Advisory. I want to know just about the teachers in the schools that are actually...
The Career Service will work very closely with the schools to make sure that they're up to date with that, just in the same way that they have that guidance, and that will be issued to schools. Sinead, so.
Okay,
Thank you, David.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the work that's going on. It's absolutely productivity and widening participation is massively important. You talked earlier, just pick on a couple of things. You said you're working closer together with other departments. Yeah, who are the other departments?
Yeah. Do you want to list them?
So TFC, the Executive Office, Department for Education, Health and Justice. They're the main 5 that we're working with. So there's a cross-departmental working group, and they've all been contributing to that, and they've been coming along to the WP Forum as well.
And obviously DARA as well in terms of CAFRE.
It's everybody?
Yes.
The 3 every group. That's good. That's good.
But everybody's been invited, and I would say that we lean into certain departments in certain areas. So obviously we engage very closely with Justice on the that side of things in terms of health, with maybe social work and that type of pathways. So yes, everybody, education have been very supportive in terms of bringing forward recommendations in terms of that collaboration piece and structure. So yes, we are working, and TO on the ethnic minorities. So yes, we are engaging across the departments.
Honestly, genuinely really encourage it, because we see so much sort of siloed working within departments. It's really good to see and hear stuff. So can you give us a couple of just to be positive and stuff, the outcomes of that, of what has happened on the ground to actually widen the participation of people from different...
So in terms of our numbers, so in terms of overall numbers, I've mentioned that we've increased by about 9.7%. So that's from about 904 students to 29,502. We have seen really good increases in disabled students. So that's up over the last 5 years from 2018-19 to 2022-23 by 41.7%. Also in relation to care experienced students, now it had a lower base, but that has increased by 78.4%. So that's really significant, and I have to say our institutions have done a significant amount of work there with our DOH colleagues. What I would say though is we're still broadly flat on quintile 1, and adult returners as well. I think we need to do more. They haven't dropped, they've been largely stable, and they are a more significant proportion of the population at 48.5%. But whenever we look at both our further education colleges and our higher education institutions, they've both grown overall numbers, FE by 8.3% and our higher education institutions by 10.1%. So I think comparatively speaking, and if you look at the CFA report in terms of Northern Ireland, in participation we do really well actually, and we have good numbers. It's those stubborn areas of deprivation, and that's why we're trying to take that different approach to the targeting and say, right, let's focus the resources that we have on those areas that really need it, and let's work with the institutions to see where we can genuinely turn the dial. So rather than having a broader approach, and we are actually seeing other devolved administrations moving that way. So Scotland would have had a national target, and we're seeing them move more now through this more flexible institutional-led approach. And for the Northern Ireland context, with a significant amount of rural learners, that makes more sense because some of our rural learners can get lost in those big numbers. So you might be at a school that doesn't fall into a specific category, but you actually have a significant amount of free school meal entitlements. So I don't know if I've answered your question there.
No, absolutely. It's absolutely vital. This is absolutely one of the things. We were out it's in Phillips. It mightn't be Phillips area, but in impact training on the Shankill and seeing, or off the Shankill, sorry. And what was happening there was just fun. It was brilliant, and that kind of nurture and wrap around care around people, as well as creating opportunity to apprenticeships. Absolutely fabulous. Is what we need to see more of. So if you're doing more of that, is your budget's been increased to allow that in those areas if you're targeting that?
So the 10% is the 10%.
Yeah.
So that's ring fenced. What I will say is that we have put additional funding into some of those programmes from the likes of the Skills Fund. There's been additional funding at McGee in respect to Ask For from the task force. So while there's that core funding, and we call it like the WP funding, there is additionality that gets put on top of that to maybe pilot those types of programmes. There's the Apprenticeship Challenge Fund. There's all of those things which might not directly be WP funding, but they will support WP in terms of progression and pathways and that route into higher education.
It's 10% ring fence now. What was it 10 years ago?
Good question. So it was 20 or 30%, and it's gone down to 10%, and I can get you the exact history of it.
Oh, that's fine, but it's halved. So the funding that has gone in has halved in real terms. So why is that?
So at the time, the Minister in post made the decision because there was a cut to the block grant, and that 10% is of additional income. So if more of additional income is given to WP students, that's coming away from what the institution could spend it on. So there was a feeling that could impact a broader student body, and the 10% was felt to be appropriate at that stage.
And actually some of the institutions spend more
than 10%.
They do,
yeah, 10% is the minimum.
I understand it's the minimum, but what I'm trying to say, your numbers are all going up, but you're actually spending less money's been spent. So how do we learn from that with everything else? There's a model there that is obviously working, but if you have more money, would you be able to tackle this even in those deprived, in the areas you're talking about? Surely that needs more money.
If we had more money, we would definitely spend it. But I think, in terms of the approach to that funding and those streams, that would have to be taken forward as part of that wider review. I think the 10% is appropriate, and as part of our engagement, none of our universities or our delivery partners or colleges had an issue with the 10%. I think the issue would be is if you increase it, it's because it's from additional fee income, you're taking it away from somewhere else. And that's why a lot of the additionality in terms of those pilot programs were funded through the likes of the Skills Fund, so we can test and learn and see what's working, and then try and mainstream it from that 10% WP funding.
Yeah, no, that's really genuinely really encouraging. It's really encouraging to see the work you're doing and that target and seeing the focus going into the areas that need it. So thank you.
Thank you. And Diana.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. And a couple of the questions I was going to ask have been taken, Sinead, particularly about that, moving from secondary level into a further or higher education. And what work are you doing with the Department for Education on that? Just reinforcing the opportunity there for widening participation, those pathways from that level into further and higher education.
Yeah, so colleagues from the Department for Education would have sat on our task and finish groups in terms of developing those proposals, and I would say, that cross-departmental alignment, it has very much been built into the development, but that practical joined up delivery that we're talking about really does need to continue into the implementation phase. So at the moment, those policy proposals have been co-designed, including with DE colleagues and additional stakeholders, but whenever we start to get into that delivery and that implementation phase and that detail, they will still be very important partners. I know Sinead had mentioned the importance of the career service and that link in with teachers and schools. That's significant. And I think also the employer part as well. So, our schools and employers and our community, we're trying not to do it in isolation, we're trying to bring everybody along together.
Do you think there's sufficient wraparound in the school setting for the students who may be facing greater challenges to get into further and higher education?
I am aware that DE has a RAISE programme, and I know that they're doing an awful lot of work in that area. Whether I think it's sufficient or not is maybe not appropriate to comment on. I think that DE are doing a lot of work in this area. I think that we can see the benefits of some of that coming through. I do think sometimes when schools don't work, our colleges pick that up, and I think it is quite expensive to do that, and that's why a lot of our programmes are delivered in a college setting are a bit more expensive, and because it is that wraparound, it's the likes of Step Up and those programmes which are really impactful for the individual. So yes, I do think there's work going on there. I think we are joined up. I think we can see the opportunities to come together, and I think as we move into delivery, that will be even more important.
And in the consultation, it called for stronger outreach and attainment-raising activity. What is the attainment? What do you envisage the attainment-raising activity to be?
So we start really young,
Yeah.
but I think there's also a part of, and I'll talk about maybe younger learners and then maybe adult returners with Aontas. So that attainment raising is the Professor Fluffy. It's going out really, really early. It's making sure that those basic literacy and numeracy skills are embedded. It's seeing those mentors and people at university and having that role modelling. So that is really impactful for our younger people. What we are finding though is that each of our institutions are targeting similar schools at a similar time, so it can actually be really difficult with timetabling to get out to go to all of the events. So what we want to do in terms of those activities is to be more joined up and come together and talk about HE as a thing as opposed to HE in a particular institution. So that's something that we're looking at in terms of those attainment pieces for younger folks. But in terms of our adult learners, I was at an event that actually Aontas ran, and when you hear of some of the lived experience from those mature learners, some of those mature learners are coming with really difficult background. They may have been put off by school, college or university. They may have had a learning difficulty that was undiagnosed. And there was a lady in particular that I can think of who was speaking very articulately. And at that time, she was afraid to even go into a college. She was afraid to, she'd had a difficult time and was very disengaging from speaking to a man. So those attainment and those aspirations and that type of trying to get folks in the mind that it's accessible will be different for the types of people that we're trying to target, and that's why those community organisations are a perfect bridge in. And a lot of our community organisations in delivering with a college, that's the first time that maybe some of those adult returners have been in that type of setting. And we would hear as well, even physically, sometimes our fabulous campuses can be quite intimidating. So if you're not used to, being in those environments, it's so I think there's a range of things that we would do, and it would just depend on the person. It would depend on their stage of life and their background and experience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That brings to end any questions of colleagues. So can I thank you all for your work on this important matter. We will share with you the letter that the committee has, and would welcome your thoughts on that. Okay. Thank you so much.
Very much.
Peter?
Chairperson, further to that, as the Chair has indicated, to share that letter from QUB, but also to seek just further information on part-time learners, age, gender and family or caring responsibilities, so we can see how student supports may need to be targeted, but also the department is looking for feedback on the consultation. So our members are generally of a view that they support the changes, but maybe they have some concerns about the what will be required in terms of resourcing and how that might link into the wider HE funding review.
Yeah, they also have no idea what they're proposing. They talked about that they have a general direction, but they're going to put together feedback from the consultation and provide options to the minister in terms of policy decision. But I didn't hear any concrete proposals, but maybe I missed them.
Well, from my end, I think, I mean, obviously there are elements that we would want to tease out. So I think as a first protocol, I would be writing to try and actually ask for clarity on those, rather than put, I suppose, as a formal proposal that we, a sense that we don't agree with it or that we're sceptical of it. I would rather that we actually try and tease out the proposals, bring it back to the committee, and then can write from a more informed position.
Makes sense, Philip.
Okay.
Members content?
Yeah, okay. That'd be marvellous.
Okay, members content, we take a short 6-minute break, and then we'll start again with Aontas. Members content?
Okay, members.
Okay, colleagues, we'll move back to item 8 then, which is widening participation in adult learning. And we'll invite our colleagues in from Aontas. Colleagues, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. We have Dr. Cobain and Conor Thompson. Very welcome before committee today, and I'll hand over to you whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Thanks very much for having us. My name's Conor Thompson. I'm the Head of Advocacy and Policy at Aontas. We're the National Adult Learning Organisation. I'm joined here today by Eve.
Hello everybody, lovely to meet you. I'm Eve Cobain, Senior Research Officer at Aontas, and I would have been involved in writing the various pieces of research that were mentioned in the submissions, so very happy to take questions on that today, and delighted to be here, so thanks so much for the invite.
No problem. And we have a couple of hard copies we can pass around if that's appropriate for
I'll do that.
Okay, just anyone wants to have a leaf through. Cheers. So we'd just like to thank you all for inviting us to today's session, and thank the clerk for providing the information in advance. It's very useful. We're here today to speak about the importance of adult and community education as it relates to widening participation. So it's very much connected to the previous presentation. At Aontas, we're a National Adult Learning Organisation. We were founded in 1969. We've been working for the past 57 years to ensure that adult education gets the policy recognition it deserves and that all adults have access to the education they want and need. Our 480 members across the island work together to make this vision a reality every day. We support them by providing capacity building, research, advocacy and networking opportunities. So we're surrounded by people for whatever reason didn't have a good experience in school, maybe weren't served well by the formal education system as a young person. Adrian Dunbar is a great example of that, leaving school and then later coming back to education in the Southwest Regional College, then the Enniskillen and Tech. We all know about the success he's had since. The challenge that we face is that Adrian and others are too often the exception. Learning and Work Institute research shows that adults who left school at 18 are 20% more likely to engage in learning afterwards than those who left school at 16. Equally, those with higher education qualifications are significantly more likely to continue learning throughout their lives, which is a great thing. The issue is that your school experience and the knock-on effects from that are very, very much significant and do limit people in what they can achieve in education and in work. A recent Open College Network report, which assessed qualifications levels in Northern Ireland, was referenced in our written submission, noted that fewer than 1 in 5 adults in Northern Ireland aged 25 to 64 participate in education compared to in education and training, compared to 1 in 4 in the UK. Our own research at Aontas helps to provide an evidence base for the adult learning sector and reveals solutions to these challenges. As Eve can perhaps get into a bit more detail during the question session, we produced a number of research reports which we've just passed round now, including the first ever community education census for Northern Ireland conducted in 2023. We also, on behalf of the Alliance for Lifelong Learning, alongside Dr. Colin Nealons of the Forum for Adult Learning in Northern Ireland, carried out a study into impact measurement in adult education, and we also published a recent all-island study on community education's role in social transformation. So we're all about making sure the research that you can see there doesn't gather dust on the shelf, and that we bring it out on the road and into forums like this, so the key stakeholders can see the recommendations, and that we can kind of put some meat in the bones of the findings. As part of this then stakeholder engagement in a Northern Irish context, we were found a member of the Alliance for Lifelong Learning and worked with Alliance members such as the Open College Network, the Open University, CO3, FALNI, the Forum for Adult Learning in Northern Ireland, ICTU and others to support and promote lifelong learning opportunities. Ourselves then, as a member-based organisation, we convene regular meetings, events, training, webinars. For instance, a recent one brought together 60 different organisations from Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland to discuss opportunities for collaboration and practice sharing. So kind of that's just a bit of background to who we are. In terms of today's discussion then, we're focused on the essential role of adult learning in widening participation and how that relates to some of the work of the department that's been discussed already in today's session. In this context though, we are speaking specifically about community education in Northern Ireland. So as was mentioned earlier, community education isn't simply any sort of education or training that takes place in a specific community. It's a distinct practice that creates a process of personal and community transformation, empowerment, social change, and collective responsiveness. This is absolutely summed up best by a community education learner themselves, who said in one of our research reports, it's not just about the learning, it's about the whole person. It's what makes it different. Community education within this tackles low educational attainment, particularly in under-resourced working class areas, and breaks cycles of poverty for people and their families. In terms of location then, where it takes place right across Northern Ireland. In the submission we mentioned some examples of organisations that we've engaged with recently at different research projects or webinars equally. Often these organisations aren't solely focused on education, and they're often community development or support organisations with an education offering as part of their services, and that's sort of a point of difference, I suppose, and an advantage that they have potentially to other elements within the adult learning space. The examples of these were sort of collated or pulled together within our Northern Ireland Community Education Census from 2023, which surveyed over 60 providers, which were delivering 798 courses to 50,285 learners in 2022. So in terms of the learner population that this study represents, it's roughly equivalent to the population of Lisburn. And really it was a snapshot or kind of a snapshot in time. But also, it's probably fair to say kind of an underrepresentation as well in terms of the number of organisations and learners taking part in this form of education. So all that being said, community education helps people who want to return to education and learning but may not have the confidence or the opportunities to do this in a formal setting like a college or university, as Annette Palmer mentioned just now in their part of the session. In terms of how this relates specifically then to widening participation in higher education, participation in both further and higher education is strongly shaped by how you got on in school. So as I mentioned previously, if you left school at 18, you're 20% more likely to continue learning afterwards than if you left school at 16. This represents a cycle of exclusion which starts at a young age, and those sort of conversely, those then with the greatest need for education are actually least likely to access it in later life, through formal routes, that is. And it's not a reflection of motivation. Our research bears it out, but these are an insight into systemic barriers that people face and an experience of generational disadvantage. Again, our evidence demonstrates that community education breaks these cycles and provides enabling supports for people to overcome the barriers that have already been discussed in today's session. In terms of maybe just a snapshot of how HE and community education interlink directly, then we have a number of examples, but I'll just share three that are maybe most relevant today. We've Ulster University's Unblocking Potential programme that were nominated for an award with us recently, the Aontas Annual Star Awards. They connect directly with community organisations to provide access programmes locally and directly in community centre halls and classrooms. The Rural Community Network of Northern Ireland's Community Development Diploma does the same with an obvious focus on rural areas. And lastly, a last example maybe being the Open University's Access course in community education settings such as Ballybean Women's Centre, and again it's delivered directly at community level. So it's just three examples of many. And in this case, they really demonstrate how community education is a vehicle for maybe accessing those maybe statistically stickier areas in terms of cohorts where you're not seeing the change of the quintile 1 and adult returners, which Annette mentioned earlier. In this case, though, the sector is absolutely spinning straw to gold during an acute funding crisis, and the community education sector needs enhanced policy focus and funded supports. Programmes like these are largely invisible in policy frameworks, and we hope to see the next widening participation strategy framework review and updates that name community education, articulates the contributions made by the partner organisations, particularly from the voluntary and community sector. There's huge opportunity here. It's going on, right across the island. It's going right across Northern Ireland, and within this context, the outcomes go far beyond just access to university. Represents an opportunity to make savings across other departments and other departmental funding lines. Again, best summed up in learner voice, as one learner put it in the community education census. Community education has saved the government a fortune not having to treat me for mental health. These organisations need much greater support, however, to continue this work. Currently, policy frameworks right across government set out the opportunities for this, and there's an opportunity to work interdepartmentally on this. For instance, on page 15 of the Department for the Economy's Skills Action Plan, it states that one of their key objectives is to work with stakeholders to increase participation in lifelong learning. We've heard examples of that this morning. Again, like many of these pressing issues of our time, WP and HE needs more of a whole government approach. A Fair Start report published by the Department of the Economy 2021 included 47 actions across 8 key areas, including key area 4, which is promoting a whole community approach to education, where adult learning and community education fits in well there. The 2021 skills strategy for Northern Ireland names creating a culture of lifelong learning and opening pathways for education's core goals, as well as key outcomes of the Programme for Government's Wellbeing Framework, which are met by community education.
Okay, Conor, apologies. I'm just going to open up for questions if you don't mind. It's just
no, that's fine.
Apologies for that. I just wanted to. We still have other issues to try and cover later in the committee session. Thank you for that, and thank you both for your really important work on this. I was really struck in relation to the stuff you were talking about. Someone stays into education until 18. So there's a current proposal from the Education Minister to change the law that would require all young people in Northern Ireland to remain in education or formal training until the age of 18. Do you have any view on that in light of the statistics that you've just outlined?
I suppose our focus is mainly on the people that have already left school, maybe many years ago as well. But I would say within that,
These will obviously be your next generation of people that.
Yeah. I think the essential consideration there is that people have the conditions for success from 16 to 18, but also the opportunity to succeed within education. Like in the Republic of Ireland, we have about a 96 or 7% completion rate to 18, which actually I think hides a lot of, which is lauded and in ways is laudable, but it also hides a reality that a lot of people are forced, potentially railroaded through an education system that damages their confidence significantly to engage in education and training further past 18, and also to have the life that they want as well. So I think having those options, and I think with the strong FE sector that exists in Northern Ireland, it's a good opportunity because there are options after 16, both academic and technical.
You don't have a position, or you do? You don't think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think that it is completely dependent on an education system that allows for that provides the conditions for people to succeed from between 16 and 18, and that simply completing school doesn't mean that you will have access to quality, dignified work.
We're blessed in my constituency in terms of lifelong learning, in particular adults, in terms of community-based providers. I've had a flick through your report, but I'm not sure if you'd had any engagement with some of these organisations, but Women's Tech, Northern Ireland Alternatives, the really, really important work, particularly in those communities that have lost an affiliation with formal education, and they feel much more comfortable having it provided in their communities by people from their communities, and then they can see people being empowered around them, their friends and neighbours, and there's this effect that all the community want to get involved and lift it up. So listen, I 100% support what you're doing. I'm going to move on to Padraig, who has been a great champion of your work and was very keen that you come before committee to share your important work. So we'll move on to Padraig.
Thank you. Sure. And look, thank you both for coming today. I think it's really, really important what you've laid out, and it definitely ties in with what we're doing as a committee, but also with the Minister's work to widen participation, widen access and so on. So there's a couple of points for me. I suppose one of the points, and you heard me mention it in the last one, was around measuring impact. And I know you did a specific report on this in 2023, 25. Okay, it seems far longer above my head.
Yeah, for us as well.
So just in terms of that, and following on from the research, what metrics would you find as the most important for measuring this? Because obviously this is going to be something that we're looking at through the department. What's potentially good practice? What have you seen from other jurisdictions, from other practice in Ireland that's good practice, and what maybe can we be doing better?
Yeah, so I'm happy to take that one. So thanks for the question. It's a really pertinent one, and it's actually a very complex area. We were delighted that the Department for the Economy were able to fund for our 6-month research project on this, but it really was a piece of research that looked more at, I suppose, the experiences of impact capture in the sector, as much as trying to provide any single model. We do have some really good case studies actually in the back of the report that maybe you can kind of peruse in your own time. But in terms of, I suppose, good practice, like we did ask organisations what the lay of the land was with their current approach to impact capture. It was clear that a very diverse range of approaches were being used, partly a result of the fact that there are many, many different funders of community education, all with slightly different, reporting structures, metrics, requirements, be that, philanthropic funders or state funders. So, providers are very much up against this difficulty of finding a metric that will work for them and best represent the huge scale of impact that is happening on the ground. There's also, I suppose, the challenge of finding funding to actually undertake this quite resource intensive work. Of course, many organisations would love to be doing longitudinal impact capture, but for so many that is just not within their scope. And, you know, I think the most commonly reported approach was an in-house tool. So I suppose often philanthropic funders will allow a bit of flexibility around how that impact is being captured. So organisations the onus will be on them to kind of develop a tool. Often that will involve, you know, a survey or, you know, learner focus groups. Other tools that were being used commonly were distance travelled. And learners really valued this approach actually, because often, you know, they would come in, enter the course, and they would say where they felt they were at that point of entry, and then be able to reflect, you know, when they were leaving, how far they'd come. So that was something that learners felt very positively about. Similarly, the outcome star was, you know, discussed as a really useful tool. It has similar, you know, approaches where the learner, you know, posts on the star where they feel they currently sit, and that can be mapped later on. So I suppose, yeah, there was great appetite among the providers for greater training and, you know, just resourcing in this issue, because even for themselves, they really want to be able to demonstrate that they're delivering robustly on what they want to be delivering on. So it's not only for the funders, it's for themselves as well. I suppose, you know, in terms of the gold standard, we would always say learner voice is integral to this. You know, we were speaking to Annette earlier, you know, we all heard her describe the experience of listening to the learner voice. And I think, you know, from the research, it was really clear that those wider social outcomes are truly captured. The intergenerational impacts are truly captured through that learner voice, both short-term and long-term. So I think that's a really important thing to integrate in any kind of impact capture. And one other piece, I suppose, that we would be interested in accessing would be, I suppose, data where learners are entering FE and HE. Could we access data on whether they have come through a community education route? Have they previously accessed community education, you know, in the years, say the 5 years prior to entry into FE or HE? I think that would be hugely valuable in terms of providing a quantitative kind of measure of that as well.
Yeah, I think that's something we could certainly take away and look at, because it gives that ability for learners to, I suppose, chart their own path, and as you say, the learner voice is so key to all of this, and actually being able to track and measure that, not just at the start and end. But I know when I worked as a primary school teacher before I came up here, and so many times in that you might have not done an evaluation until June, when by that stage, you know, all the work had happened, everything was already in transit, so it makes much more sense to do it on an interim basis. The other thing was around what government can do, and I'm conscious that in all of what you've said, it's about collaboration rather than competition. It's about empowering communities, as Philip's mentioned, and I'm sure others will as well. So in terms of, I suppose, extending that conversation around best practice, what can government here do? What can government in the south do? But critically, what can both do working together? Because for communities like my own, I live in a border area who many students from Donegal come into Derry, many students from Derry go to ATU in Donegal. How do we actually get the community piece as key to that, and how can we work on a, I suppose, an all-Ireland basis to try and align those priorities?
Yeah, I think that in terms of that collaboration first at local level, maybe linking back to what you've just mentioned now, that we do see in higher education issues around retention, and we know anecdotally from our members that isn't an issue in community education. Like one of our members, Longford Women's Link in Longford Town, that they provide higher education in the community directly, and they have over 90% completion rate for their higher education programs that are run locally. So if those sorts of enabling wraparound supports can be provided initially in the community, that helps and supports people move on to further education and higher education, it might alleviate that fear between certain groups around working off a similar kind of pool of learners. In terms of the north south collaboration, like one of the things we were discussing in preparing for today is that universality of the practice, that community education, the community education approaches in women's tech will mirror to Longford Women's Link in terms of what the work they're doing and who they're serving. So it makes sense that we can like pool knowledge, especially with a often gap between a lot of the sector being maybe coming up to retirement age potentially as well, and sharing that knowledge kind of generationally, but then also across the border as well.
Well, thank you, Ian. And I think one of the key things that I've picked out from your previous reports as well was that sometimes, and I think the lens of our committee sometimes doesn't maybe lend itself to this because it's economy rather than education, is that we always see that there has to be an economic output. There always has to be, rather than education for education's sake or for community empowerment's sake. So I think that exactly what you're saying about linking those community-based groups, looking at women's tech and those other projects, how we link those together is where our focus needs to be. Is not just about the economic output, but it's about the education output as well. So really delighted to have you here. Really keen to sort of engage in any future reports you're doing, and I think that it feeds very much into what we as a committee need to do towards looking to what the department are doing in the strategy. And I think certainly we should take away the suggestion of looking at the community education prior to entering FE and HE and chart that path. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Sinead?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation so far, and I would echo what my colleagues around the committee have said, the wonderful work that actually happens in education in our communities, and sometimes they pick up where others have failed, and it's sometimes wonderful just to see that progress in individuals. Just one thing, how can flexible progression pathways help Northern Ireland, I suppose, overcome some of the challenges that are posed by AI? And I was listening to the other day to a podcast about these micro-credentials, accredited micro-credentials for AI, for short courses, 50 hours. They've been run out by private training providers, and there've been, I think, Youth College or that are run them as well. But I really think that is a real opportunity for community training providers to start running out some of these micro-credentials, accredited for those that need access and participation in education. And is there any work being done at the minute? Because I don't really hear it. It's really, I suppose, companies and organisations in the Republic of Ireland that are doing these 50 hours accredited. I don't hear too much happening on the ground in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, certainly I would say there is a lot of work happening around like building learner awareness of technologies and the huge impact that we are all trying to keep a pace with. That has on everyone. I think that digital literacy piece is huge within the levels, entry level and level 1 and 2. And I think when you're mentioning as well AI, like I think it's something that the whole education sector obviously is grappling with, but I think community providers especially are dealing with the fallout of like misinformation in a very real way. So certainly we have been trying to be proactive around that and have developed a community education against disinformation workbook, which we're currently rolling out in the south. And I know that colleagues and practitioners here have described a real interest in accessing that and training around that as well. So I would say that it's a really vital area to address some of these issues, and to empower learners with the tools to understand and use information well, as well. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Conor.
Yeah, I think just kind of following on from that, those sort of like bite-sized micro credentials that are become more and more popular. Like community education has been doing that for decades, providing small scale, like accessible, low stakes programs for people to take a step back into education. So it fits naturally that they might be a vehicle for that. And I think that alongside the technical skills that are potentially need to be developed there is that disinformation critical education piece there that's so important. And I know like Rural Community Network are doing a lot of work with that in Northern Ireland, and work around specifically like anti-racism there as well. And then alongside that in the south we have AIready.ie courses, which are free, kind of online clickable sort of like entry kind of programs.
And is there an equivalent here in Northern Ireland?
No, but in kind of prep for today, I was speaking to Kathleen O'Hare, the chair of the Skills Council, and she has been kind of working with the Department of Further and Higher Education in the South on this. Yeah. Small
bite pieces, I think, are so important, because the gap widens if we don't kind of try and ensure that everybody can get on board. There's, as well as challenges, there are opportunities, and I suppose we want to be maybe not first responders, and it's such, but when you see other courses being run out in other parts of the island, it's important that we don't get left behind. That's it. You've answered other colleagues' questions that I was going to ask.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you. Very quick, two things for me. Sort of the community bit is brilliant, and that little bite-sized bit of getting back in and starting to learn is great. But it's then the barrier to FE. Can you talk us through? The further college. If you wanted to go on, are they counted to get in? So if this still barrier of Maths and English as you come into further education colleges, and that's the barrier there, is there? Can you talk us through, is people able to get through, or is there still barriers remaining for people to move on to formal qualifications, if you like? Yeah.
I think both things are true. There are still, barriers still exist, and it's really been acknowledged in the discussions today what those barriers are. There's clearly a very good awareness of that. But we do have fantastic accounts, from learners across Northern Ireland and the Republic who have successfully progressed and have described, community education as absolutely foundational to making that transition. I know it was mentioned, that some higher education is taking place in community education settings, and in those settings, you might see somebody who's kind of been in the creche in this organisation, go all the way through and access higher education in that same organisation. So you just see the huge ripple effects and how that intergenerational disadvantage is being tackled. But I absolutely do believe that there are still huge barriers. Even just the confidence piece that was mentioned earlier about being able to step in to a very beautiful, higher education building and feeling maybe out of place, feeling like you don't belong there. And I think there's a huge amount of work to be done to reckon with that and to change that culture. And I think community education providers build the confidence of learners to empower them to feel that they have every right to be also in those spaces should they choose to be. And I think that's really critical. And especially for women returners, it was mentioned earlier, I think, if you've had to step away from learning or the labour market to raise children, your confidence is going to be absolutely on the ground. And I think that it's vital that, while these childcare issues and challenges around financing that are in place, that women who have to step back for whatever reason are able to build their confidence and access part-time courses to do that, and the supports that they need. And I think it's through that, work on the ground that they will access it.
Absolutely, really great. I really appreciate it. Just one more thing for me. I noticed the Peace Plus funding as I was reading through. I was in Dublin 2 weeks ago, and we were talking. Well, it was one of the issues because Peace Plus will come to an end at a point in time, and hopefully we can that can be extended. But if it isn't, is there any work going on collaboratively north south to make sure that the funding is in place? Post that, if they're just rather than waiting to the point where there is no funding, to make sure we've got that continuity.
We have been with that in mind. We had a meeting with the Shared Island Unit and Department of Taoiseach in late March to to basically discuss that issue and see what was on the agenda there. And what we have off the back of that is an application for a pilot programme of a shared island community education forum. That's, it's applied for, so hopefully the funding comes through for that, but we won't know till probably August or September. But to run that as a year-long project for both building connections between organisations and building on the connections that are already there, but also to run some pilot projects that could be learner co-designed as well, and then to build on that to have potentially a distinct shared island community education fund.
Absolutely brilliant. Listen, thank you both for coming in. Thank you,
Diana.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. It's been really, really important because it should be access for all, obviously, to education, and we know the difficulties going back into education that a lot of people who've been out of the workplace for a long time do have. You mentioned the Learner Voice Forum. Is there anything similar in Northern Ireland? And how do you see that being able to contribute and have an influential voice with the department?
Yes, so I'm currently working on the Learner Voice Forum in the Republic, and that has just gone from strength to strength over the past 10 years, and we now capture the voices of thousands of learners annually. There isn't currently any systematic approach to capturing learner voice in Northern Ireland. We would love to see that resourced, and I think it would speak to some of these things that we are discussing today. Having that resource would be able to automatically access and surface some of these issues, particularly issues around barriers to participation emerge in that data repeatedly. So I suppose, I would just really say that is something we would hugely support. I think it would have incredible value and would be a huge resource for, and it is cross-cutting as well. It would have implications and positive impacts for the Department for the Economy and also other departments because there are obviously numerous departmental funders of community education. So it could feed into a lot of important things.
I'm glad also you mentioned the Rural Community Network and the training that they're doing, because that's really, really important. That's very often the first step to regain, the appetite to learn or the ability, to retrain and I think also enter the workplace. So thank you very much for that. It's very interesting.
And
thank you,
finally,
Chair.
Kate.
Thank you. Not much to add, just I'm a big fan of the work that you're doing. I've seen how important it is in my own constituency, especially for women and women with children. I can think of a couple of projects I've been to where they provided childcare on site so that they could do the training. And I think your report that you've shared really highlights how it's life-changing for people. So it's really important work, and I think if we can raise the profile of it, absolutely will. Just on the adult learning for AI, it's more than a workforce tool. And I was speaking to someone who works in AI governance recently, and they said it's either too technical or too surface level, and actually it's SMEs, and that's where the gap kind of falls hardest on. So on the staff who work within there. Just thank you. Your recommendations are really clear around sustainable funding models and kind of the policy, and nothing else to add other than I think it also speaks to the fact that the officials formally thanked you during their presentation for the work you're doing. I think that speaks volumes, so thank you.
Thank you. And on behalf of the committee, you can clearly see the wide support for the vital work that you undertake, and no doubt that members will ensure that we continue to liaise with you and feed into development of the committee's work, but also trying to influence the work, not just as Patrick rightly articulates, the work of the Department for the Economy, but the Department for Education, Department for Communities as well. So thank you so much for your time. It's much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, Peter.
So members, in terms of actions then, is the committee content to write to the department just indicating its support for community education, also asking it how it is helping to ensure best practice and consistency of delivery among community education providers, including in respect of cross-border, so we're just on our quorum members, and also indicating, asking the department what it is doing to support the development of micro-credentials and how that might link into community education, including in respect of AI.
Yeah, Patrick.
Yep, no, totally agree with that. And then I think it would be worth writing in on the piece around data. So community education prior to entering FE and HE. So even if we could ask for within the last 5 years prior to entering.
Okay.
Data on entry, so it's data on entry to HE and FE. In respect of those, this is contextual admissions kind of thing, so it's the level of community education that have supported those admissions. Yep. Okay, fab. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, colleagues, very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to item 9 then, members, which is an SL1 industrial training levy. The department intends to lay an SR, the industrial training levy construction industry order Northern Ireland 2026. The proposed rule will come in subject to negative resolution procedure and will be operation on the 31st of August 2026.
Mr. Honeyford.
No, it's just. I just want to make a point on it. That's all.
Oh yeah. The industrial training levy construction industry order Northern Ireland 2022 enables CITB to raise funding through a levy on employers in the industry. Okay, so the levy rate is at 0.5% in respect of relevant earnings remain the same. Rate operating during the preceding levy period, an employer will be exempt for the levy if they're less than £80,000. The department undertook a consultation and has provided a short summary. So you wanted in on this?
Yeah, I haven't had to pay CITB for 4 years since I was here, but it's just a note. They're freezing that at 80,000, but it's been frozen at 80,000 for 15 years or whatever those years are. That's bringing in basically. This was not always for everyone. Yeah. They're bringing in basically everybody here that has one employee into a thing, and it's just small guys who are fighting hard to keep themselves going are now been taxed effectively. And I just make a point of that because I the small builder or plumber or whatever has been brought into a charge here that wasn't. I don't think there was a spirit of it ever intended to be. Yeah.
No, understood. Okay. Is the committee content to note the proposed rule, publish the relevant documentation on the committee website and launch a call for views? Members content? Okay.
Great, members.
Great. Yep. Agreed. Item 10, correspondence. Are members content that they are disposed of as per the index? Agreed.
Sorry, I do think it's very worthy to raise the Queen's University letter again. You raised it earlier in our previous discussion, but it was an extremely hard-hitting letter. And
item 19, members of page 676.
Talking about the reduction of student numbers by 700, and also I suppose asking critical questions about capital spend in Magee University. And I mean, I do not like to see universities kind of batting against one another, because that was never the intention about the expansion of Magee. I do think it throws up a lot of issues that need to be tackled urgently, and they've said they've moved from urgent to critical in it, and I don't get a feeling of where their conversation with the minister was left. And so therefore I think it's incumbent, you were copied in or CC'd in, it's incumbent upon the committee to kind of ask and drill down in some of these questions that have arisen. It's a concerning letter. It's rarely that you see something put down by the universities in such black and white and harsh terms. Even a suggestion of increasing numbers and recruiting beyond Mazen, which would be extremely worrying, kind of just throwing out the government caps. Not that, we've discussed those caps in detail over the years and how they kind of curb, but they're also looking at removing the ROI students from the Mazen, and we've discussed that as well. But these are all in black and white, and I think that we need to bring Queen's in and discuss this and ask the Minister what's her next steps, where's she moving with this, because this is not something that she can rest on. She needs to actually tackle these major issues urgently.
Sinead, Kate.
I agree with that, and I think that they mentioned the review of higher education funding. This is where ultimately all of this lies with, and if the universities and the stakeholders aren't behind this, then I think as a committee we need to make clear that everyone needs to get together to find a solution. We need to know what the vision for higher education is, so we know what we're funding. And there's too much that's happening now, which is so unsettling for the universities, for the staff, for the students. So yeah, I support kind of writing, and also just reaffirming the need to find common ground and to actually have an ambitious review.
Patrick?
Yeah, look, I mean, for me, there's two issues here. The first one is around All Ireland mobility and the fact that students from the south have much easier access towards universities in the north than students in the north have to universities in the south. And I think there is that critical imbalance. It's something we've come back to around UKSCAO admissions and so on. So, I mean, there's a role, certainly, for the Department for Economy to look at in that. I think there's a key role for DeFeris in the south to look at in that as well. And I know from the department's end here, they've been very much pushing that. So there is a broader conversation around this. I also think that this speaks to the wider funding model of the block grant. The allocation that we and all parties signed up to this and agreed to this as a day one motion in the Assembly when it was brought back, is that we are critically underfunded by the British government. And I think that we can't get away from that. We can't shy away from the fact that these restrictions have implications for our universities, for our schools, our health service and everything else. So, I mean, no problem in raising it, but I do think that those are the two critical pillars to this, and that we need to keep sight of those as we move forward.
Okay. Yes, our members content then that we contact the department to seek their response to this letter to the Minister. And we also have Queen's come in to discuss this with us. And, you know, I take Padraig's point in relation to the wider context, but there's also wider context in terms of this is a decision in relation to fees that the Minister has also taken. So, you know, there's many people involved in this scenario, so we need to try and get an outcome that suits all concerned. So the proposal from Sinead invite Queen's in and also write to the Minister. Members content with that?
Yep.
Okay. We then move to correspondence. No, we don't, because we've done that. Forward work programme, Peter.
So very briefly then, members, unfortunately district councils couldn't come to us next week. They've just provided a written briefing. This is about Go Succeed. So you can see what we've got. We've got the utility regulator and the department. If members then are content to book the department to come to talk about the hydrogen policy feedback, so again it's energy related, if we're happy with that, then 17th of June is going to be our joint concurrent, so we'll be back again on the issues of skills, strategy and Transform Ed Northern Ireland. Minister then will come on the 23rd. That's a Tuesday, so she'll come at 9:30 to 10:30. Officials will stay on till 11. So I'll obviously, the chair will be writing to her. So it's really about budget, but we can also ask her about the HE issue too. 24th of June then we have the UU unions and the department in UU in to talk about that one as well. So the rest you can see. It's also planned then, members, that we would have we come back during summer recess, Wednesday 26th. On Tuesday 1st of September, Wednesday 26th of August, Tuesday 1st of September. If you would, members would kindly put that into their diaries so that we can start to deal with the bills that we currently have. Just point out, forward work programme, really busy coming up to summer recess. If the Good Jobs Bill gets its second stage before summer recess, I'll be asking the department to come in and brief you in advance of that, because it is quite a big bill and you want a reminder and a refresher. So maybe quite action-packed between now and summer recess. So if members are content with the forward work programme as amended.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Any other business, colleagues? No, thank you all very much indeed, and the committee will adjourn and be back again next week. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.